meeting of the council at the Guildhall. Please be seated. Firstly, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to the group of journalism students from York St John University who have come along this evening to observe our meeting. I hope you find our proceedings interesting and informative. As usual, our meetings are being webcast so that residents and other members of the public have the chance to see them live or to view them on demand later if they wish. In the unlikely event of an emergency requiring us to evacuate the building, please make yourselves aware of the emergency exits and follow the instructions of the security staff who are present this evening. I would also like to remind members that the guillotine will fall 3 hours after the start of the meeting. I will take a view as the meeting progresses as to when we have a short break at an appropriate point. Can I remind members and officers and members of the public to please turn off your mobile phones, switch to silent or mute any other electronic equipment for the duration of the council meeting. Thank you. Before we move on to the business of the meeting, can I remind everyone of our agreement at the July 2023 meeting of full council when we passed a motion requiring the Lord Mayor to remind us all of our net zero targets. With that in mind, you will all be aware that York's target for net zero is 2030. We need to adapt, thrive, despite extreme weather, and encourage new skills and jobs to ensure a just transition. However, this is just the start. With only 1,740 days to the 31st of December 2029, the challenge is immense. We must and shall continue to work together to address the climate emergency. As usual, can I remind you to please speak clearly during the debate and to always use your microphones. Remember to switch off your microphone after speaking. You should ensure that the microphone is directly in front of you, no further away than a sheet of A4 paper, and please speak directly into it. You should be close enough that your breath hits the grill on top. Please also ensure that papers and laptops don't obscure the microphone. Please indicate that you wish to speak by raising your hand, and I will then call upon you to speak at the appropriate time. As always, please continue to behave respectfully and appropriately at tonight's meeting. I would like us to have a good, productive debate, giving as many members as possible the opportunity to have their say. To help us get through business effectively tonight, I'd be grateful if we could keep the meeting focused and to the point. I will keep us on track if I feel we're losing focus. I have not received any apologies from members. Do members have any apologies to report? Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Apologies from Councillor Taylor this evening.
Thank you. May I ask all members who have a personal, prejudicial or disclosable pecuniary interest in any of the business to be discussed at tonight's meeting to declare your interest now if you have not already done so in advance of the register of interest. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just under item 17, I saw advice from the monitoring officer and would like to just declare an interest that is in my declared register of interest, but I am the Deputy Mayor for Police, Fire and Crime for York and North Yorkshire Combined Authority, and part of my role is holding the police to account for the delivery of the York and North Yorkshire Domestic Abuse Strategy, which is included in that motion. I have requested and received a special dispensation to participate in the debate on that motion and to vote on it, which I'm very grateful for, given the importance of the issue for women and girls across the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. Nobody else? Do I have members' approval to sign the minutes of the Budget Council meeting held on the 27th of February 2025? And do I have members' approval to sign the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 27th of February 2025? As you know, this will be the last council meeting I will chair, so I just wanted to thank all members for their support. Since our last meeting last month, the Civic Party has had the privilege of attending several events which I believe show York at its best, celebrating the people who make our city so special. We are a diverse city, welcoming people from all over the world and celebrating their culture and traditions. I'm thinking in particular of the magnificent Chinese New Year celebrations, the showcase of Sri Lankan dance and customs, enjoying Bollywood here in York, sharing the breaking of fast at the mosque, and on Commonwealth Day, sharing stories with residents and members of the armed forces whose families came from many different nations. And of course, coming together to remember the victims and survivors of Holocaust and taking lessons from what has to be some of the darkest days in our history. We've also visited schools and older people's residential homes and shared in the joys of music with people with special needs. And one final thing I would like to mention is the community woodland that I've visited on several occasions over the year. And I will continue to visit it privately after May. I know this place holds a special place in many of our hearts, particularly Councillor Widdowson, Councillor Kent, and Councillor Grevelius. For me, it represents part of York's promise and part of our commitment. We agreed that the Lord Mayor has to remind us of our commitment to net zero by 2030 and how the clock is ticking down. So on my last council meeting, I'm asking us all to think about that and what more we can do to bring about net zero. And if you haven't already visited the community woodland, please do so. It's a peaceful, inspirational gem in our very, very busy lives. Thank you. We now come to the public participation session. We have 7 registered speakers tonight. Before we proceed with our speakers, I would like to remind all our public speakers of the rules relating to public participation set out in our Constitution at Council Procedure Rule 10. In exercising their public participation rights, a member of the public is entitled to express views, positive or negative, about the performance of the council, but must not say anything which is defamatory or discriminatory, make any personal attack on an officer and or member, disclose confidential or exempt information, including personal information. I now call upon our first speaker, Flick Williams, who would like to speak on agenda item 17, specifically the motion on changes to disability and long-term sickness benefits. Ms. Williams, you have up to 3 minutes.
Lord Mayor, the executive members have already heard me speak about the impacts of a mere 1.7% rise to benefits from next week against the massive rise in prices of all life's essentials. I'm still waiting on my written response for that, by the way. The crisis is already here and the greater burden on costs to this authority inevitable, long before this Labour government takes its machete to the safety net that is social security. Disabled people are variously angry, terrified and despairing, knowing that we are now under existential threat, fighting for our literal survival. Within the disabled community nationally, already 2 people are known to have taken their own lives directly as a result. And it's not a fair fight. Many sick and disabled people would have liked to have been here demonstrating today, but the barriers to doing so were so great. This pair of purple shoes represents them. This Labour government's rhetoric is directly contributing to the exponential rise in disability hate crime. Disabled people now report being afraid to go out, being afraid to use their blue badges as people are spat at and have abuse hurled at them, accused of scrounging off the state. And this isn't really about work at all, rather an attempt to balance the books on the backs of societies already most disadvantaged by an economically illiterate government that doesn't understand poor people spend all their income in the local economy, not salt it away in the Cayman Islands. Across the country, we see Labour councillors resigning the whip and sitting as independents. Be thankful you could not persuade me to stand in a safe Labour ward because your majority would now be gone. I find the Labour amendment to the Lib Dem motion a rather cynical attempt to claw back the moral high ground, having failed to use either of your 2 motions to address these issues. I suggest members go read The Politics of Disablement by Mike Oliver. But I haven't heard any of you speaking out against the government's declaration of war on disabled people. Silence is complicity with what your party does in your name. So proud of proclaiming Labour holds the city, the mayoralty and both parliamentary seats, now the cracks begin to show. The combined authority inactivity trailblazer, short on detail, will, like all the welfare to work schemes before it, fail beyond moving a couple of percentage points into precarious work. The DWP's own reports only measure those still in work 8 weeks after, not beyond. Why is that? The Sunday Politics exposed the diametrically opposed views of the city's 2 MPs, one who fears the consequences of growing inequality and throwing another 50,000 plus children into poverty, and one who has joined the backbench Arbeit marked Fry Tory tribute band who says taxing wealth doesn't work. Good to know he thinks all our problems stem from lack of self-respect. It's time to pick a side.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when that item is dealt with. I now call upon our second speaker, Anne Norton, who would like also to speak on the motion of changes to disability and long-term sickness benefits at agenda item 17. Ms Norton, you have up to 3 minutes.
These announcements have caused profound distress to disabled people in this country. The Labour government expects us to believe that they are supporting disabled people back into work. An obvious first step would have been a commitment to clear the backlog on the Access to Work scheme. Instead, the proposals appear punitive and do nothing to assuage the years of mistrust of the DWP caused during Tory austerity. This has been handled in a way that maximises distress. The drip of leaks on Fridays, then it turns out the government has not produced the green paper in accessible formats, the impact assessment not published on release either. The same day as this green paper was announced, Labour MP Naz Shah had an access failure when the Committee for the Assisted Dying Bill refused to accommodate her need to charge her hearing aids, meaning she was forced to leave the committee early. If this is how Labour treats their own colleagues, how are we supposed to believe they will do anything to support disabled people into work by insisting employers provide access accommodation? Research into many chronic conditions has been underfunded. The long-awaited announcement from the government's ME delivery group doesn't include funding, and a study in Science Norway published on the 21st of March states very few ME CFS patients return to work after diagnosis. Ignoring and dismissing chronic conditions and leaving people without any effective treatment for years is the real scandal here. The whole argument is based on the deeply flawed and insidious idea that worth only comes from work. It shows a fundamental misunderstanding of disability. The social model of disability adopted by this council states that we are disabled by society and so need accessible housing, transport and the public realm. Paralympian and peer Tanni Grey-Thompson has been left on trains multiple times this week, and she is an active member of the workforce, still being treated as a second-class citizen. But there will always be some people whose impairments prevent them from working. They also have worth and deserve to have a decent standard of living. This Labour Council benefits from the work of many disabled people who give up their time to volunteer to be on the York Access Forum and other committees. According to the government, our contribution is worthless unless we are in employment. This council should consider paying us for our expertise. Motion 17I is the minimum response required. These cuts should be opposed because they are inhumane. Any supposed savings made will be short-lived and look set to backfire on local councils. I commend York Central MP Rachel Maskell for taking a stand against the cuts and welcome the council's actions to do the same. I will conclude with the historic words of Labour MP Nye Bevan. Illness is neither an indulgence for which people have to pay, nor an offence for which they should be penalised,
20
but a
seconds, Ms
misfortune,
Norton.
the cost of which should be shared by the community. Thank you.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when that item is dealt with. I now call upon our third speaker, Ben French, who would also like to speak on the same motion at agenda item 17. Mr. French, you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Let me start by saying this. I don't think the Labour councillors sat here today got into politics to prop up a regime making life harder for our city's disabled and vulnerable. I don't think so. But unless they speak out properly against this government and against them making life harder for our city's vulnerable residents, that's what they are doing, propping up a cruel and immoral regime. As we've heard, the MP for York Central understands this, but do the councillors? So far, the silence has been deafening. As we have in the motion today, we've heard how disability is such a difficult thing for many people. We have the Lib Dem motion we have before us today is unfortunately too weak and toothless, as is the amendment, but it does highlight some of the points about how disability affects so many of our residents in York. First of all, cuts to disability support will hurt our local economy. Many people use their payments to be able to access employment and access support into employment, and this will go away. Cuts to disability support will hurt our local economy again because many people use their payments in order to be able to budget and spend money in local shops and services. How is this a good thing? It's such a false economy to lose these payments. Cuts to PIP and also other welfare will hurt our council services because many people use their payments in order to be able to access social care, access support. This will push many to the brink and mean that they struggle with this. Finally, many people often use their PIP in order to be able to integrate into the city, access community services. Less PIP payments and less welfare will mean less people are able to do this. This isn't about getting people into work. This is about picking on the easy targets, time and time again. The Green Party is shocked to see a Labour government promoting so many harmful policies when there are so many options to fund a decent welfare system, such as, and let's say it, taxing the rich, having a wealth tax. All that leads me to do is say this. I don't think that financial support for our city's disabled and vulnerable should be a party political issue. So shame on the Labour Party for making it one. All that's left for me to do now is urge the councillors, the Labour councillors and all the councillors before me, speak up about this. Use the very real influence that you do have. Speak up about these policies and the damage they will have on our city because it will be severe. All our residents are watching. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account when that item is dealt with. I now call upon our fourth speaker, Lally Hewitson, who would like also to speak on agenda item 17 in relation to changes to disability and long-term sickness benefits. Lally, you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The government's own figures say that nationwide cuts to PIP will drive at least 250,000 people into poverty. They have admitted these cuts are ideological, not financial, driven by a desire to get people back to work, despite the fact that PIP is unrelated to employment status. Which people are going to be targeted to have their independence payments reduced or removed? Where are the jobs that they're meant to step into so easily? Can you find me the employer who will keep someone who's been signed off with suicidal depression for the last 3 months? Will my friend with paranoid schizophrenia be asked to take on a regular schedule and trigger her terror that people are following her? Will my friend with fibromyalgia have to sacrifice 3 days of his life bedridden to recover after every day in the office? Will the teenagers I'm sheltering with their neurodivergence, memory issues, suicide attempts, and episodes of psychosis have to find a part-time job that can accommodate them when the floor is melting beneath them, or just getting out of bed triggers a screaming panic attack? What employer will take on the risk of having my friend with ME in the office, given how often she faints? When you cut PIP, the expenses it covers don't magically disappear. The financial burden is just shifted onto disabled people, punishing them for surviving with conditions and circumstances they didn't choose. It shifts onto their friends and families, most already struggling with the cost of living crisis. They who are also carers in their own homes, who are helping these people who are getting PIP, they then have to pay more. No one who voted for Labour voted for this. The Council's move to review local financial aid for people is urgently necessary, but very far from enough. These cuts must be fought at every level, and I urge the Council to condemn this discriminatory budget and take every action possible to pressure the government to reverse their decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account. I now call upon our fifth speaker, Hilary Conroy, who would like to speak on the same motion at agenda item 17. Ms. Conroy, you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I struggled with what to say here today. I could list all the statistics. I could tell you the stories of my terrified friends. I could read to you from John Pring's book, The Department. I could just sit here and cry for 3 minutes and hope that my embodied emotions would stir some empathy. I instead decided to focus on the root of these issues, which is the societal belief that disabled people should get better or die, put up or shut up. Every conversation about benefit scroungers is dripping with this belief that disabled people are too inconvenient, too demanding, too needy, too expensive to exist at all. This individualized neoliberal ideology harms us all, but disabled people are being targeted constantly and directly, told to get to work or starve trying. The worst part is we all internalize this belief. I've spoken to disabled people in work who will not disclose their disability or request their legally protected rights to reasonable adjustments to make their work more accessible to them because they have internalized this belief that they are not worth anything if they're not fully functioning members of society. This belief is a poison stripping people of their humanity, their empathy, and a foundation of care within our society. It is fed to us from birth. As long as the baby's healthy, that's all that matters, right? And we are constantly ingesting this poison from our various forms of billionaire-owned media, telling us that disabled people should be doubted, that we lie, that we cheat, that we are never contributing enough, that we deserve to starve, that our lives should be ended so this society does not have to bear the burden of our existence. Rob Nixon describes the concept of slow violence as a violence that occurs gradually and out of sight, a violence of delayed destruction that is dispersed across time and space, an attritional violence that is typically not viewed as violence at all. That is what ableism is and what it's doing all day, every day. When bus drivers leave wheelchair users at the side of the road, when BSL interpreters are not provided, when neurodivergent people are not giving access to diagnosis and medication, when the NHS refuses to provide wheelchairs for chronically ill people with fluctuating mobility, when you do not feel able to ask for support when you need it, when you do not feel able to take a sick day, lest you be considered less capable or, God forbid, needy. We are all complicit and suffering in this toxic ableist culture. This has never been about money. This is about who we believe is valuable in our society and the attitudes of those in power, both nationally and locally. This council signed up to the social model of disability back in 2022. I'd like you to think about what tangible changes have been made as a result of this declaration, and how might this council show this support for disabled people, not just in the motion later tonight, but in more practical ways going forward. Thank you.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account. I now call upon our sixth speaker, Luca Wolney, who would also like to speak in relation to the motion on changes to disability and long-term sickness benefits at agenda item 17. Mr. Wolney, you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you very much. Firstly, I would like to extend my thanks to the Lord Mayor for allowing me to speak at short notice. I understand I was late in registering. I'd also like to give my thanks to Councillor Fulton for motion 2 under item 17. I have some concerns about this just as a private citizen with neurodiversity. I did try to reach out to my local MP, but when I reached out to them on this subject, they seemed to feel that was a good moment to disconnect on LinkedIn. I don't have time within the 3 minutes to dissect the policy, as so many other people seem to have taken the time to prepare. I have not prepared in that way. But even in the broad strokes, there are just some things about this that don't really make sense. Firstly, the move to shift to a particular floor of 4 points, having filled in various PIP forms recently, that's actually quite a high bar. And the reality is that for a lot of neurodiverse people, it's a small tax across a wide variety of places that the impact comes in, and rather than one specific spike. But more importantly than that, the government's rhetoric speaks about wanting people to get into work and to help them into work. And to that, all I can really say is I couldn't agree more. And for the vast majority of people I know with neurodiversity, they couldn't agree more too. Work is very important for mental health where it is possible. Having a purpose, whether it's work or another purpose, is vital. I have recently worked within a mental health company within York, and there is a true and real epidemic of mental health issues alongside neurodiversity, in many cases for the same reasons. The proposal that cutting is somehow going to help with that just doesn't really add up. The solution to that is going to be more support, perhaps better targeted support, of course, but cutting entirely the provisions that are in place won't help. The PIP isn't means tested precisely because the impact isn't purely for those people working. The impact is overall, and the support helps that be achieved. So this is a counterproductive measure on the government's part because the economic problem they're describing, which is very real, it's a huge issue coming down the pipeline. I'm blessed to have studied economics, and this is something that we are not prepared for. But the proposal doesn't solve it. It won't solve it. It'll make it worse because if you are removing the support that exists to get people who are in positions like myself into employment, they're not going to match. It's not that people lack the desire to work. It's that they lack the means. And we're going to need as many people as possible working going forward. Personally, my read of this situation is that this is probably more to do with the upcoming huge defence bill. Yeah, 20 seconds. The upcoming huge defence bill coming. And my 2 cents is that I would prefer that the government was honest about that, if that is their motivation. But I did ask a couple of friends who are neurodiverse for their perspectives on this, and they were a little less measured. The 2 exact quotes I got were, "Stop killing us," and "The system just wants people like me to go away and die where they don't have to look at us." I consider myself blessed to be able to take a more nuanced view.
Thank you. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account. I now call upon our 7th speaker, Gwen Swinburne, who would like to speak on governance matters within the remit of the council. Ms. Swinburne, you have up to 3 minutes.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I have circulated a briefing document to some of the members in the room. Under the law, our community governance must be reviewed every 10 to 15 years. Yet since 1996, we've never had one, despite repeated requests. Next year marks 30 years of neglect. This is not an oversight. It's a deliberate denial of our rights. With every new monitoring officer, with every shift in council control, I've asked for, hoped and expected this glaring democratic deficit, striking hardest at the unparished, deprived inner wards to be tackled. Nothing changes. When Labour won in 2023, I dared to believe the council would finally lead on this. I was wrong. New staff, new council, same excuses. It's coming, but it's not. Both officers and members seem content to perpetuate this democratic outrage rather than fix it, as many other councils have done through their decisive leadership. Barely a meeting passes without demands to consult parish councils, to send them this or that. And each time you do this, the inner wards are left voiceless, invisible, excluded from democracy. Some inner wards are lucky they have secretive planning panels, but no public access. Meanwhile, parish councils decide planning openly. Parishes are offered and tap into funding pots. We are denied. Equally, outer parishes, overdue their own governance review, limp on, some struggling, many councillors unelected, a sham of democracy. Demand for change is clear from some parishes, from some members, from the few residents who recognise the issue and the Groves Association. For the unparished, it's worsening. With the local plan finally adopted, parish councils will soon control large sums of community infrastructure levy, whilst in the urban core, staff will spend it for us anywhere they like, on what they like, as has always been the case. Watch as the private clubs and elite groups benefit as King George's Field, Doddy Park, and Clarence Gardens rot. We see public money, our money, funneled to private sports clubs. They get so much, the council refuses to tell us, claiming commercial sensitivity. This is a betrayal of the inner wards, Lord
20
Mayor.
seconds, Miss Swinburne.
Deprived, disregarded, and now robbed of our resources. 30 years is too long. Please end this democratic disgrace now. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms Swinburne. Your comments have been noted and will be taken into account. That concludes the public participation session this evening. Now, I will wait for a few minutes to allow people to leave if they're wanting to leave. Now on to item 6. We haven't received any formal notice of any petitions, unless you know differently. No. Thank you. I now invite the leader, Councillor Douglas, to present her written report, which you will find at agenda item 7 of the council agenda. Standing orders allow 3 minutes for the presentation of the leader's report and 3 minutes for any response by other group leaders.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Tonight, I will focus my speech to you around our city and our community. York is fortunate to have such an active discourse focused around individuals and organisations of all forms. We have seen this in action tonight with the protests and our public speakers concerning benefits reform. I want to thank them all for attending the Guildhall. It is immensely important that we as councillors hear from our citizens and hear them loud. Over the past 10 days, disabled people have told me of the extreme worry, concern and impact that the proposed changes to welfare and employment support within the Green Paper, Pathways to Work, are causing. I believe we have a collective responsibility to represent the concerns of our residents, to listen and take action. And that is what I hope we will do later this evening through Councillor Fenton's motion, Changes to Disability and Long-Term Sickness Benefits. Within that, you and I will join together collectively to ask me to write to ministers to lay out our concerns and ask for reconsideration of elements of the Green Paper, particularly those that aren't up for consultation. I cannot emphasise enough my appreciation of the very difficult and shifting fiscal position the Chancellor has found our country in. But I will always say that we must protect the most vulnerable and in need in our communities. Through our own council budget consultation, the people of York told us they believe this too. I and colleagues across this chamber stand with them and will do as much as we can to represent our communities and support them through this very difficult time. The highlights of March started with York International Women's Week and International Women's Day, an opportunity to celebrate all the women who have had such a strong and lasting historical impact in York. The community project Her Story is an ongoing opportunity for us all to learn more about the hidden female history of York. I encourage you to read the Her Story boards on the hoardings of the Mansion House once they go up during renovations. I also had the honour of joining the Lord Mayor and community representatives for Commonwealth Day celebrations at Roundtree Park, and the month finishes with Transgender Day of Visibility on Monday. It is an opportunity to acknowledge and celebrate all the transgender people in York through cultural and social events over the coming days. Transgender people are an important part of our communities, are very much welcome in our city, and we turn our back fully and actively on transphobia and all other forms of discrimination. And to finish, I'd like to lead a vote of thanks and congratulations to the Right Honourable Lord Mayor of York, Councillor Margaret Wells. This is, as she said, her last full council before the end of the 2024-25 civic year. And she has, I'm sure you'll all agree, been a fantastic and much loved Lord Mayor, and Councillor Rowley will have a hard act to follow. So can we give the Lord Mayor a round of applause, please?
Thank you very much for that. Right. Do any other group leaders wish to respond to the leaders' report? Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And I was going to seek indulgence before we start, just to express our group's thanks to what you've done in this chamber and in terms of representing the city before my 3 minutes starts. Obviously, you've done a fantastic job, and we extend our gratitude to you for doing that. Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is the start of a new era at full council, the first wholesale change of meeting format since the last Labour administration. This is therefore the first new format leader report. Our fear was that a report already light on detail would become even more vacuous. Here, a leader report focusing on 4 months of activity stretches to less than 1,000 words. If you strip out the success you inherited, such as York Central and the Labour plan, it's barely 500. While we welcome a section focused on delivery for the city, I doubt residents expected this to focus almost entirely on a corporate peer review. The only thing worse than dither and delay is probably obsessive navel gazing. Outside of the West Office bubble, residents are rightly focused on key issues such as the future of the dualling of the ring road and other transport links throughout York and North Yorkshire. Residents and businesses in York and Scarborough will be shocked to hear the solution to transport links is not improved infrastructure, but more buses on already crowded roads. Yes, we need more buses, but also the infrastructure for them to travel on. The local plan is now approved, giving the green light for significant development all around the outskirts of the city. But at the same time, this executive is turning its back on the essential transport improvements. No news on the dualling of the ring road, no news on Haxby Station. The adoption of the local plan is a key step forward, and I reiterate my comments at the last meeting. It is vital this administration commits to delivering this plan. The inspector was quite clear that what makes York such a special place is already at risk due to necessarily ambitious plans, and any further overdevelopment would destroy the character of the city and would not deliver additional affordable homes. The local development scheme will set out a timetable for the local plan review, and it's time for the executive to be upfront about their intentions. I started at the budget meeting. The theme of my speech would probably be, what is the point of Labour? We often jest about the lack of interest in our council webcasts and who, if anyone, is actually listening. Well, clearly my words resonated, as a month later, the leader of the Social Democrat and Labour Party asked the Prime Minister the very same question. What was the point? Residents in York are suffering from the retention of the 2-child benefit cap, the axing of the winter fuel allowance, and now a direct attack on the most vulnerable in our city with cuts to welfare benefits. Locally, residents have received a Band D council tax bill of over £2,000 for the first time in history. For those with a green bin, that's £250 extra a year since you were elected. Councillor Webb will no doubt stand up later and herald the end of austerity. The reality is Labour Group locally, nationally and regionally creating a new and more cruel form of austerity, which even the Tories didn't contemplate, pushing more disabled people and children into poverty and depriving
10
older people of
seconds.
crucial support by cutting funding for day clubs. It's frankly shameful. This morning, as I delivered in my ward, I was stopped and asked, "Who are you from?" and told, "Better not be Labour." That's a sentiment I'm sure you're going to become familiar with, and you're going to hear a
Can
great
you
deal
wind
more
up,
of in the
please?
next 12 months.
Thank you. Councillor Stewart.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm always tempted to say I won't reply because I don't think it adds a great deal. But as the leader and Councillor Eyre paid tribute to you, I have to at least do that because I think you've been an excellent Lord Mayor. And Councillor Rowley has a hard act to follow. So well done for everything you've done. Councillor, I'm sorry you don't have the name recognition within your ward that the person didn't know who you were. It must have been disappointing for you. And as even the Tories didn't go that far, I would like to remind you that the Tories from the early part of the administration, when Councillor Healy was a big cheerleader of theirs, went further and faster on so-called austerity than at any point, and that was when they had the Lib Dems in power with them. Without the Lib Dems in power was actually a far, far lower rate of cuts or reductions or anything like that than the Lib Dems. So history shows that, I'm afraid, Councillor Eyre. In terms of the report, I have to agree with Councillor Eyre. There's next to nothing in here, unfortunately. We have the tribute to Joe Thomas, one of the last Normandy veterans, and I think it's great to put that sort of thing on record. Just over a week ago, we saw John Hemingway, who was the last person involved in the Battle of Britain, dying, and he was born in Dublin, nicknamed imaginatively Paddy, but he was actually a bit local in terms of he trained first at Brough, not far from here, and he had a crash landing in Church Fenton, not far from here, and we truly are all the poorer for not having that generation with us anymore. But yeah, in terms of the report, then we've acknowledged the work of the Children's Directorate in terms of getting rid of agency staff many times. We've acknowledged the fact the local plan was about to be delivered and now has been delivered, and a meeting's been held to do with the combined authority. That there's not really a great deal there. There's certainly next to nothing there in terms of where the Labour Party should be in delivering its manifesto commitments, like freezing council tax, like free school meals for every primary school child across the city. So disappointing not to see that, but I won't take up much more time because clearly we do have the motion on disability and PIP, and Labour councillors based on the last 14 years will presumably be at pains to speak on that. We'll presumably see all sorts of big speeches having a go at their government. We'll presumably, I would think, see a few people in the Labour group resign the Labour whip tonight as a proper act of solidarity. I can't really see how, after what many of them have said over the last 14 years, they could stay in a Labour Party that is changing things as they are. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I will now invite members to question the leader and executive members in respect of any matter within their portfolio responsibility. In accordance with Council Procedure Rule B8, please can you address the Lord Mayor with your question, speaking clearly and indicating to which executive member your question is directed. I'm going to just give a few more rules with regards to this because it's a new way of doing things. There is a maximum of 35 minutes in total for questions in this session. As a reminder to members, under the new Council Procedure Rule B8, supplementary questions or comments are limited to one question or comment from the original questioner and a total of one further question or comment from another member. If any of the questions which have been put cannot be answered at the meeting, a written reply will be circulated to members within 5 working days following the meeting. Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. This is a question for the Executive Member for Culture and Economy, and I would just be interested to know what conversations you've had around supporting the cultural sector in the city, thinking not only about the large cultural organisations, but in particular some of the smaller spaces in the city. And this is with particular regard to the challenges that those small spaces face, often from somewhat predatory developers who perhaps seek to take them over, close them down and turn them into something that doesn't speak to the cultural vibrancy of the city.
No, thank you, Councillor Crawshaw, and I could talk on this subject for 35 minutes, no problem at all. So I'll try and keep it a little briefer. Tonight, while we are sat here, people are assembling in Tempest Anderson Hall for Reignite 8, which is a project the council has been supporting through Government UK SPF money, and it brings together all of the cultural and creative sectors and indeed other businesses in the city, so that all of the businesses realise what an incredible creative sector we've got. And in terms of the kind of jobs that we're talking about, the jobs that people do in these sectors don't require any academic qualifications, but can earn around about £50,000 a year on average. So we are looking for this sector to offer pathways for our residents, especially those without academic qualifications, into decent jobs where they can afford to live in York and raise a family here or wherever it is they want to do. That process has been so successful. We are now looking for space in the city where that sector can grow into. It's also brought together all of the cultural institutions. So we are considering looking at the possibility of setting up a cultural advisory board along the same way as the Tourism Advisory Board, because that's been so successful to bring all those organisations together and help it grow in the city. However, the challenges do remain for the smaller venues. We are still, in spite of all of our best efforts, without a 500 cap venue that the city so desperately needs, and we continue to explore opportunities for that. But also, we are still having to work in order to save our smaller venues. So, as you may be aware, Councillor Crawshaw, in your ward, which is indeed my ward, we are currently campaigning to try and save the Victoria Vaults as a music venue. It has been a very successful music venue over the last few years. A lot of those up-and-coming bands, a lot of student bands played there. Unfortunately, it has been bought, and I think the intention is for development rather than for reopening. So we will continue to campaign for those venues because they are the lifeblood of culture in the city. So I could go on for another 30 minutes if anybody wants, but okay, we'll call it quits there. Thanks.
Did you have a supplementary? Does anybody have a supplementary? Moving on. Councillor Healy.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Can the Transport Executive Member please explain why no apparent progress has been made in responding to the recommendations of the Scrutiny Task and Finish report on Dial and Ride, which was completed 9 months ago?
Thank you for this question. So as you know, we put some money aside in our budget to start looking at the model that we need to develop for a Dial and Ride service. Our officers are currently working on appointing some consultants to develop that model. And we are absolutely committed and realise that it's a vital service, but we're not going to rush into just doing what happened before. There were problems with the last model. We know we've got to develop a different model. We're also working with the Mayoral Combined Authority to see if we can do working across boundaries and serving North Yorkshire and York at the same time. So we're committed to doing it. It's underway. There will be a report coming forward, but we're not ready to do that yet. We're not going to rush into it. We're going to get it right.
Do you have a supplementary?
Yes, Lord Mayor. Given at Tuesday's EPAT, we were told that the Park and Ride tender hadn't been completed or on track due to a lack of officer capacity. Is she confident that there was enough members of staff in this area to complete the task that you've just outlined in a reasonable amount of time?
I am confident because officers briefed me this week on the dial and ride, and that they're progressing to appoint a consultant to develop that model for us. So yes, I'm confident. Yes, we have got a lack of capacity in some parts of the transport and highways, but we are managing that, and we will move forward with the priorities, and dial and ride is a priority.
Was there another supplementary? Anyone? Councillor Fenton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Without wanting to preempt discussion that's coming later, this is a question for Councillor Lomas as Executive Member for Finance and Equalities. In light of the announcements that we've all been digesting over the last week in relation to government plans for long-term sickness benefits and other welfare reforms, can she set out what steps you've given initial thinking to in terms of how the council can respond to the challenges that these changes will present? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Fenton. And I share your concern about the broader impact of changes to a system that was already creaking under the weight of demand on it. As you know, as a council, we cannot make direct changes to statutory benefits that are governed at government level. But what we can do is make sure that the services we are able to provide directly by the council can support people where other systems might have gaps. And we've proven our ability to do this. For example, in response to the removal of winter fuel allowance from people who were not claiming pension credit, we started a campaign to directly target people who might be eligible for pension credit but not claiming it. And we have gained over £10 million lifetime support for those people who we directly targeted and supported to claim pension credit, which also allowed them to access winter fuel allowance. At the same time, we were targeting people who might just miss out on the threshold for pension credit using our household support funding and our York Financial Assistance Scheme. And you'll all know from sitting here talking about the budget last month that we have this in the coming financial year put additional money into the York Financial Assistance Scheme so that we can help those residents in York who need us most.
Do you have a supplementary? Does anybody? Councillor Whitcroft.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. I'd like to ask the Executive Member for Housing about the new funding that the government has just announced for affordable housing, £2 billion for across the country. What does this mean for York, particularly for our affordable housing drive in replicating the successful work we've done for affordable housing, such as Ordnance Lane development in my ward?
Hi, Councillor Whitcroft. Thank you very much for the question. York has benefited from the Affordable Homes programme in recent years. A number of projects, including the James House hostel, was delivered via the Affordable Homes programme. This is very welcome news. There had been top-up money for the existing affordable housing programme since Labour took power in July, but that's for the existing programme. This new announcement of £2 billion to deliver up to 18,000 additional social homes is to be welcomed. I'm very much hopeful that York will be able to benefit from it. As you say, we have a number of affordable housing projects, not just those being delivered by CYC, by ourselves, but also those being delivered by registered providers and other housing associations who are also entitled to benefit from applying for this funding. So in addition to the work that the MCA and the funding that the MCA will have
for brownfield affordable housing. We're in a strong position to be able to benefit from those monies, but we haven't been allocated the funding, neither the MCA nor York, but we will be applying to Homes England for that funding as the projects go along.
Councillor Whitcroft, do you have a supplementary? Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Just a supplementary on that. I just wanted to pick up on Councillor Pavlovic's report. And I was in Chapel Fields this morning talking to residents about the work that's taking place to improve the existing council housing stock. I just wondered if you could update us on the work that's taking place around improvements to our existing housing, particularly around damp, which was an issue raised by a number of residents with me this morning. And we had York Community Energy in Chapel Fields this morning, and they're also working with residents to try and reduce energy bills. But it was the improvements to housing that was the big issue that people wanted to talk to us about.
Thank you, Councillor Coles. So in addition to the new housing programme, the housing delivery programme, £12 million is invested this year in capital works, and that will include replacement bathrooms, kitchens, windows and doors, not just in Westfield and not just in Dringhouses. Though there is a great deal happening in Dringhouses. I know I keep mentioning that, but damp and mould is a really significant issue, and we have reduced the number of properties since we took power in 2023. In the number of properties across the city that have damp and mould. Work is ongoing. There's going to be completion of work in Bell Farm, for example, specifically around damp and mould, and we will continue to focus on that. And as Airwab's law has identified, we will now respond to notifications of damp and mould quickly and promptly. And I'm pleased to hear from your residents that they have noticed the difference.
Thank you. Councillor Nelson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I would like to ask the Executive Member for Finance about the improvements that I've been very pleased to see on Acomb Front Street at the moment. It's really, really great. I'm sure every councillor in the room has been up to Acomb to have a look at our new mural. And it's fantastic that such significant investment is being put into such an important area of our city in what I would call the benches, not bollards approach. So I would just like to ask the Executive Member about sort of how the UK SPF has played a part in the improvements and, you know, the reasons for it being targeted in the way it has been. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Nelson. And I think we must also thank the Lord Mayor for joining us to unveil the mural on Front Street last Saturday. She spoke very eloquently about the importance of place and the importance of places like Acomb. And as Councillor Nelson knows very well, I am very proud of Acomb. I'm proud to be from Acomb. I'm proud to live in Acomb. I'm proud to represent Acomb. And during my almost 6 years as a councillor, I have done my best to share that pride with all of you. In almost every speech I made to council as a backbencher, I mentioned Acomb. The UK SPF funding was given for promoting pride in place. And that's why I have just mentioned the word proud about 17 times, because I'm really happy to see so many people sharing that pride now in our space. We have thinned out the bollard forest that so many people found to be unwelcoming, harsh, not conducive to a shopping space where people wanted to linger. And the improvements that we've made, thinning out that forest, replacing it with planters, with green stuff, with benches, with some genuinely community designed public realm, has really made it a welcoming place that people want to linger. They want to spend their time there, they want to spend their money there, they want to meet friends, use services, they want to have fun. The banking hub is now open, as you know, in its temporary home in the library, ousting local councillors for their surgery to a different room temporarily. And I'm delighted to announce that the market provider has just announced a second market per month, Flourish and Feast, on the second Saturday of the month. And I know Councillor Nelson knows about that because I spied a quote from her in the press release about it. I've always thought that Acomb has potential to be the place to be for out-of-town shopping, and it's great that we are now seeing a bustling shopping high street. I'd particularly like to thank all who contributed to the public engagement over the last year that we've done about this, as well as those who worked on the project, including the council officers and especially Art of Protest for the work they did, not only to engage the community in designing and delivering the mural, but also to work hard with young people from across Acomb and Westfield and surrounding areas to get involved in art and to truly believe that art is something for them, because we know how important that is in our young people's futures.
Did you have a supplementary?
No, I think that Councillor Lomas did an excellent job of responding to my question. Thank you.
Does anybody else have a supplementary? Councillor Widdowson.
Thank you. It's a question for Councillor Kent. Councillor Kent, I was puzzled by the mention in your report that the number of missed waste collections has gone down, as the scrutiny scorecard presented at EPAT earlier this week suggested the opposite is true, with the direction of travel being red for both the number of missed collections and the number meeting criteria for recollection per 100,000 collections. So is the executive member correct, or is the scrutiny scorecard correct?
Thank you, Councillor Widdowson. So on the basis of the information I had when the report was written, there were fewer reports of missed waste collection. I think there's some digging behind the scenes that needs to be done, because whilst the same crews are collecting from all properties, the green waste is also included in that. So there is probably a higher propensity to report if you pay for something. This is human behaviour. And those figures are not separated out, but the crews are not reporting any increase in missed waste. I think the numbers of reports may be going up, but to give you a proper answer, I will delve into those figures and give you a written response.
Yes, please. Okay. So your report also mentions that fly tipping is down. Official statistics from the council show that the incidence of fly tipping went from 2,368 in 22-23 to 2,500 in 23-24. And after 11 months this year, it's already at 2,675. Are you getting incorrect statistics given to you?
Again, I'm going to delve into those figures and get back to you with a written response, but the figures I was given when I wrote the report suggested that the figures were down.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have a supplementary? Councillor Mason, sorry, was that a supplement? No. Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. One for the Transport Executive Member. I believe that the dualling of the Outer Ring Road is a vital part of our efforts to reduce city centre through traffic, creating safer, more pleasant areas for cycling, wheeling, walking, and improving public transport reliability. Can the Executive Member please confirm whether she remains committed to delivering in full the dualling scheme, which planning permission was granted for and secured with cross-party support?
Thank you, Councillor Mason. Well, first of all, we're delighted that we now have a local plan, but we absolutely recognise that part of that local plan is to deliver the upgrades that are necessary for the development around the city. And so we're absolutely committed to doing that. Of course we are. What we're looking at the moment is we have consultants who are assessing the options for how the Outer Ring Road can be phased so that we can deliver it with the budget that we have. And so there will be a report coming forward soon to look at how we deliver the Outer Ring Road. But in short, my answer is yes, we're committed to delivering those improvements to support our sustainable travel strategy and to enhance the city for everybody and to allow our fantastic city to progress and achieve its full potential.
Did you have a supplementary?
Yes, please, Lord Mayor. So can the executive confirm personally that she is committed then to the full dualling scheme?
What I said was that I am committed. Obviously, we don't know, we can't commit when we don't know what the budget is for doing what was approved in the Planning Commission. So what we have to look at is the budget that we have and how we can phase the works to deliver what is necessary to enable those developments, first of all, and then bring about the improvements that we all want to see. So yes, I have a commitment, but I can't possibly commit to something when we don't know what the budget available is and how much that's costing. So the consultants are currently looking at the costing and how it can be phased.
Was that supplementary, Councillor Stewart?
Yeah. Just to ask the executive member, when's her best guess for when spades will first be in the ground?
Again, I can't answer until I've had that report from the consultants. So I haven't seen it yet. Yeah.
So, Councillor Villiers, when you've had the report, is it your intention to let the councillors know then?
Yeah, I'm very happy. As soon as I've had that report from the consultants, I will make sure that it will be brought to executive and it will be public and we will all be able to scrutinise it and see what the recommendations are.
Thank you very much for that clarification. Councillor Rose.
Thank you. And a brief point of information before I ask my question. The 4,100 words report that we have here is actually the longest since last summer. I haven't checked before that. 3,500, 2,700, the other ones. This is the new approach appears to be longer reports. And the slightly fewer than 1,000 words appears to be the difference in how many words there are between this and 2 years ago when Councillor Aston brought the leader exec report in March 2023. So it's significantly longer, and thank you for the detail, Council Leader. My questions for the exec member for Transport, Lord Mayor. On page 50, there's a reference to the public consultation about Park and Ride, and we've heard about the retendering, potential double retendering. I just wanted to understand what you think we are able to achieve with that, and particularly around accessibility, if that's okay.
Yeah, the Park and Ride is a really great opportunity for us because when we retender, we can think about how we can improve what's already a fantastic service. And I'm delighted to report that this morning I went to a production line at Castleford to look at how the buses are produced and what kind of options we could have to arrange the interior to make it as accessible as possible. And our access officer came with me. We had a really, really interesting and productive visit to look at those buses. And our commitment now is to be engaging with the disabled community to bring them on board to help us understand what's going to make what kind of layout inside the bus, what kind of features will make it as accessible as possible. And I think there's a real opportunity for us in that Park and Ride tender to bring forward a public transport system that is so much more accessible for absolutely everybody. So there's something exciting there. And in addition, we're going to be looking at other improvements that we can bring about with that Park and Ride tender We could be looking at cross-city services. We could be looking at better links to villages. We can be looking at evening services. And we can look at greater integrated transport options with things like overnight parking. So there's a lot of good things that will come, and some of that will come in combination with the development of the park and ride hubs, which is coming out to consultation soon. So I think there's a really bright future for our buses, and there's a lot of positive things coming forward, which I'm looking forward to sharing with you all soon.
Did you have a supplementary?
Just one small supplementary, Lord Mayor. Would you be able to confirm / promise that the public consultations will directly engage the disabled communities of York and ensure we're referring to and talking about those aspects?
I absolutely will confirm that, and it's really, really important to us to get this right and to make sure it's as accessible as possible in all of our public transport. So yes.
Any other supplementary? Councillor Widdowson.
Thank you. It's a question for Councillor Douglas. The Labour government has announced plans for a 15% headcount cut in civil service jobs. Can the leader explain whether she believes this will support plans to locate a government hub on York Central site, which will help to create the high skill, high wage jobs that we all want to see in York?
Sorry, Councillor Widdowson, I couldn't quite catch you when you stumbled over your words there. Do I support a government hub coming to
Right, what I'm
York?
asking is, the Labour government have said that there is a 15% cut in civil service jobs.
Yeah.
York Central is predicated on civil service jobs going there. What is your plan for making sure that we get the high wage, high skilled jobs from the government onto York Central?
Right, I will tell you what I can, and then perhaps Councillor Kilbane can answer some of it as well, because actually the jobs aspect is his role too. So yeah, we're in constant conversation with the government property agency over that tenancy on York Central. It is very much still a high priority. The developers, Homes England, Network Rail, the partnership are still working on that. So we're expecting to get an update as the comprehensive spending review decisions are made. But at this point in time, we're still feeling very optimistic, and it will be great to see such a really instrumental and impressive building over there. But I'm not really sure that it's totally predicated on, York Central is not predicated totally on government jobs. There's a great deal of opportunity there around other forms of work as well. We're looking at the Innovation Hub, which is really exciting to bring scientific lab space in there, and growth at hub space for new and growing businesses, which is really important for our city because there's an absolute dearth of that availability. And as you might imagine, the interest in the buildings on York Central is really high. So we've just had the closing of the procurement for the hotel space on there, and the interest to take that up was really quite impressive. So to be quite honest, we're very optimistic about what opportunities York Central can continue to bring into the city. And I'm not sure that we fully understand exactly what that will look like yet, given that it is a long-term project. So huge opportunity, and we're open for business and encouraging inward investment. Councillor Kilbane, do you want to add anything?
Only if Councillor Widdowson wants me to, because the question was to the leader.
No.
Thank you ever so much for the offer, but no.
Did you have a supplementary then? No. Anybody? Councillor Eyre.
Has everyone else been taken?
Yeah.
Fantastic. So to Councillor Steels-Walshaw, what conversations have you had with colleagues from the Integrated Care Board about the impact of the proposed 50% budget cuts that they're facing in the third quarter?
Those 50% budget cuts are in the very, very beginning stages, and I have begun to speak to them. But at the moment, there is nothing set in stone about what's going to happen, or what that's going to look like, or what changes indeed are proposed at the moment.
Supplementary then in that terms of, I mean, the ICB is entirely back office. They will lose 50% of all of their staff, basically. What planning are you doing, or what implications do you think that will have on our adult social care services, losing that resource from the NHS at such a crucial point?
Well, as I say, it's very, very early days, but we are in conversation with the ICB and with adult social care as to the effect it would have, because the potential could be that the whole restructure and things could work in a very, very different way. But at the moment, we do not know what that looks like.
Is there any other supplementaries? Councillor Ben Burton.
Thank you. I've got a question for the executive member for children and young people. The public health report that's coming to committee, to council, highlights a number of challenges facing children. Can you set out what we're doing to respond to these in the city, please?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Burton. I think that report, and we will obviously talk more about it later, but it is great to see a focus on children. But it is a real shame to see the challenges that children are facing in the country at the moment, and particularly in York. What are we doing? Well, we're doing quite a bit, actually. I think firstly, the York Healthy Schools Award, that is a project that is working between York and North Yorkshire Public Health teams. And that has sort of 3 different levels. So you've got bronze, silver, gold. They are very much focused on not just physical health, but mental health within schools. And indeed, to get the higher awards, you actually have to show support for staff wellbeing as well, which has a huge impact on children's wellbeing. So that is one avenue that we're looking at, and I really just want to thank the staff in schools who've taken the time to do what they can to gain that status, because it is an effort and it does take time, and it is certainly something that's welcome. As well as that, the York Place Board, the York Health and Care Partnership, I have consistently advocated for children. To my sins, they've actually put me on the board now in order to continue to advocate for children, because I think that has been a focus that has probably been missed, and that's something that I'm really glad that we can now move forward on. I think it's worth at that point saying that we also have a SEND Employment Forum, so supported internships for children and young people with education, health and care plans, working in collaboration with Aviva, York College and a national charity called Project Search. Those internships have started and are running this year, and I think that's really fantastic for young people to access those projects. It really is giving them a sense of achievement. It's giving them a sense of what it is to be in work environments, and that is a real positive for them and their families. The health and wellbeing surveys will continue in schools this year so that we can continue to identify particular trends in York and then tackle those accordingly. I think as well as that, recently schools have been working through the ADHD friendly status, and we've had a number of schools that have been successful in achieving that status, and that is to support students within schools with neurodiversity. And it is fair to say that we have a long way to go in the school system to do what we can to support young people with neurodiversity. But I will always applaud any staff that are taking the time and commitment to supporting those young people, because school is a challenge. I think we all know that. And I think it's clear that it has got more challenging over time. And I really, really welcome the focus on that. I'll stop there. Like Councillor Kilbane said earlier, I could carry on.
Councillor Burton, did you have a supplementary? I think you had a supplementary, Councillor Eyre.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Talking of the challenges facing children, given the government's own calculation says a spring statement will put 50,000 children into poverty. What calculations have you done on the impact of York? How many children do you think will be affected directly in York and put into poverty? And what steps are we taking quickly to be able to support those in the future?
That is a good question, Councillor Eyre, which is really nice to see from you. I think what I would say to that is it is quite early stages on what the effects will be on children in York. We've got to be clear that the number of children in poverty in this city has raised considerably over time. And I think if you look, for example, at figures around pupil premium percentages within schools, they have consistently risen over time. And so I think that there is an awful lot of work going on already to combat the poverty that's already been created over the last few years. But that's not to say that these cuts will not have an effect, and we should acknowledge that, and we should prepare for what we can do moving forwards. I think for my part, I was in conversations with officers today about how we poverty-proof our classrooms, how we poverty-proof schools. As well as that, there was a head teacher's termly briefing that takes place where the focus of that was how do we poverty-proof schools? And I think the council's role in that is convening those schools from different trusts, from the maintained sector, bringing everyone together to make sure that whatever we do in one school in York, we're doing across all the schools in York. There are really key things we can look at. So uniform costs, for example, we can obviously look at free school meals and what we can do to support there. We're supporting, and we already have supported, in fact, we were an early adopter of supporting auto-enrolment within schools for pupil premium free school meals, because that has a huge benefit on young people and their families. As well as that, we can talk about the transition between primary and secondary school, the costs associated with that, going into specialist lessons, for example, digital access. I've been working with IT reuse, and we're trying to get to a point where we could almost do a mobile phone drive to actually get old mobile phones and then clean up the technology and redistribute those to young people who need them. So there are a variety of things that we are working on. There are a variety of things that we want to push forward, because, as you well know, I'm absolutely dedicated to doing what we can for young people in poverty in this city.
Thank you, Councillor Webb, for that very informative answer. It did take longer than I was expecting.
He asked the question.
But that's fine. That concludes the questions, and we're now moving on to agenda item 9. I'd like to invite Councillor Douglas to move the recommendations of the Executive to Council from the Executive meeting held on the 11th of March 2025, as contained in the minutes of that meeting and reports sent out in the Council agenda and agenda supplement.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. And so this is concerning the review of the council's scrutiny function. Apparently, Councillor Eyre thinks is a waste of time by the sound of it, but I'm not sure that many of his group members think that. So I am going to propose that, and believe that Councillor Fenton is going to second it.
May I have a seconder for the recommendations? Councillor Fenton.
Formally seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I now invite debate on the recommendations. Please indicate if you wish to speak, and when called upon, say clearly which recommendation you wish to comment upon. That'll be a no then. Councillor Douglas, you do have the right to reply.
There's no need, thank you. Thank you.
I will now take a vote on the recommendations in minute 89, which relate to the approval of proposals relating to the review of the City of York Council scrutiny function. Voting at this meeting will be by a show of hands unless otherwise indicated. Please raise your hands when I ask in a moment to indicate whether you wish to vote for, against or abstain in relation to the recommendations. Can I ask you please to keep your hands up long enough to allow officers to complete the count? All those wishing to vote for the recommendation, please raise your hand now. Thank you, members. Any abstentions? The result is 45 in favour and 1 abstention. That recommendation is therefore carried. That concludes the executive recommendations. I now invite Councillor Fenton, the Chair of the Corporate Services, Climate Change and Scrutiny Management Committee, to move receipt of his report set out in the Council papers.
Formally moved, Lord Mayor.
May I have a seconder?
Formally second and reserve the right.
Thank you. Does anybody wish to debate the report, or is Council happy to agree? Thank you. We'll now move on to the next item. I now invite Councillor Douglas to move the recommendations of the Audit and Governance Committee to Council from the committee's meeting held on the 17th of March 2025, as contained in the minutes of that meeting and reports set out in the Council agenda and agenda supplement.
Moved, Lord Mayor.
May I have a seconder, please? Councillor Hollier.
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Does anybody wish to debate the recommendation? That'll be a no. Councillor Douglas, again, you have the right to reply.
No need, thank you.
I will now take a vote on the recommendations in minute 68, which relate to the approval of proposals relating to the polling district and polling place review. Voting at this meeting will be by a show of hands unless otherwise indicated. Please raise your hands when I ask in a moment to indicate whether you wish to vote for, against or abstain in relation to the recommendations. Can I ask you please to keep your hands up for long enough to allow officers to complete the count? If you wish to vote for the recommendations, please raise your hands now. Thank you very much. I think that was unanimous. Therefore, the recommendation is carried. So thank you. We'll now move on to item 12. I now invite Councillor Melly to move the recommendation of the Licensing and Regulatory Committee to Council from the Licensing and Regulatory Committee meeting held on the 5th of March 2025, as contained in the minutes of that meeting and reports set out in the Council agenda and agenda supplement.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yes, formally propose the recommended statement of policy and cumulative impact area.
Thank you. May I have a seconder for the recommendation? Councillor Cuthbertson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Seconded and reserved.
I now invite debate on the recommendation. Please indicate if you wish to speak when called upon. Say clearly which recommendation you wish to comment upon. Oh, this is good fun.
No, thank you, Lord Mayor.
I'll now take a vote. I will now take a vote for the recommendation in minute 87, which seeks approval to amend the draft policy and or cumulative. I haven't got the right teeth in again. Impact assessment. All those wishing to vote for the recommendation, please raise your hands now. That's unanimous. The recommendation is therefore carried. That concludes the Licensing and Regulatory Committee recommendations. I now invite Councillor Steels-Walshaw to move the recommendation in the report at item 13 of the council agenda, seeking to approve publication of the Director of Public Health's annual report for 2024-25 as proposed at page 244 of the agenda.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I am going to say something about this report because I just wanted to pay tribute to the young people who had been involved with helping formulate this and looking at how important it is. So I'm really pleased to present this year's Director of Public Health's annual report, and it's the first written by Peter Roderick in his director role. These are a statutory duty on the Public Health to write and for the council to publish. And it shows the independent view of our city each year in the challenges of our health and the things that can strengthen to improve it. This year, it's really important that the report focuses on adolescent health. We have 25,000 young people aged between 10 and 19 in York. And this report makes a fundamental point that the health of our next generation is a measurement of how well we are doing together as a society. We rightly live with the expectation that the generation we are raising up after us should have the resources and opportunities that we had, and hopefully more, to help them live healthy, flourishing lives. And although young people in York are some of the most vibrant, creative individuals, artists, scientists, mums, dads, entrepreneurs, politicians, public servants of the future, they are also a generation with huge challenges on their health. The generation perhaps most affected by the pandemic, the first generation facing worse living standards than their parents, and a generation who may share many uncertainties around their future, social, technological, financial, and emotional well-being. This report seeks to strike a positive note throughout and makes the point that if you spent even a brief amount of time with our wonderful young people in York, it's hard not to be positive. But it also shines a light on some of the key health issues with the aim to prompt and action greater partnership working amongst all who work with young people so we can better tackle the challenges. There are 6 key findings around diversifying demographics of young people and their changing emotional and employment journeys, their mental health, their new emerging health risks, societal factors affecting health and the health of our most at risk young people. And it makes 10 recommendations, 6 of them are costed, and specific recommendations around programmes which partners are committed to, and 4 specific recommendations to young people and their carers around gambling, vaping, smartphones and mental resilience. There's a real focus at a national level on this ageing generation, and it's good to see the report and endorsed by Dame Anne Longfield, the former Children's Commissioner and Director of the Centre for Young Lives. So I ask you as a council to endorse and note the report and formally publish it through your debate and deliberations. Thank you.
May I have a seconder? Councillor Webb.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I'll try and be briefer than my answer to the question. Yes, I'm, as I said earlier, I'm absolutely pleased that this report is unashamedly focused on children. I think it's long overdue. That's not to say that we don't have a focus on all ages when it comes to public health, but Peter Roderick has taken the opportunity to raise the concerns around children in this report, and I think that's really important. As Councillor Steels-Walshaw said, for the first time, it's harder to grow up now, and your future is likely to be tougher than your parents. And this highlights symptoms of problems we have in society, problems caused by cuts to funding in schools, in health, and a narrowing curriculum within our schools. The result of years of governments promoting individualism and only focusing on a very narrow set of measures. So, and that all has implications and impacts on children's health and well-being. So, I think for us, we need to think about what are those targets that people are focusing on. particularly within schools. It's clear from the report that there is a concern that by focusing on measuring a narrow band of data in schools, this is not helpful and it's not helping children's mental health. And so it's something that we should address. In York, we need schools, we need councils, we need health colleagues, regardless of the status, whether it's a trust, whether it's a maintained school, whoever it is, to feel comfortable about holding each other to account for this type of data that we see in this report. As a council, I think we need to be the anchor that hold those different organisations together. And I think that that is something that we can do and we can do very well. And I think it's very important that we do hold different partners to account. But as is outlined, there are recommendations for what we can be doing immediately and what people can do to help each other and help themselves. I think it's an absolutely fantastic report, and I think it's something that hopefully we will build on. I hope you've all read it and think about it when you're conducting your ward work. How can you best support young people in your wards? Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone wish to debate the proposal, or is council happy to agree? Councillor Waters.
It is now. Thank you. It just seems rather deficient to me to have an annual report, especially when the local plan's just been approved, that doesn't make any mention of increased healthcare provision in terms of hospitals, increased primary healthcare provision, which is what concerns most people in York the most. So in that light, I can't support this public health annual report. Let's get to the nitty-gritty that really matters to people. The simple fact is they can't access healthcare when they want to. We are supremely deficient in this city as to primary healthcare, and then following on with the district hospital. I'm sure there's many more in this chamber that can remember when the district hospital was built. Look at the population of York since. We cannot carry on in this way. We cannot carry on ignoring that fact. And that is why an annual report should be highlighting that every single year. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I wasn't planning to speak, but just to respond and pick up on the points that Councillor Waters was making, that the work of this report, I think, is about preventing future health problems. It's about reducing inequalities between our generations. We have got the first generation of young people currently who did not experience the Sure Start scheme. That scheme, the children who are missing out on that scheme are now 15 and below. That generation has also had the pandemic to deal with. I just think this report is a really important way of focusing on reducing those inequalities for the next generation. And I think the council is doing some amazing work to try and reduce that inequality and improve the outcomes for the next generation, targeting work where it is needed most, free school meals, mental health support, out of hours school activities, everyone in their wards. We fund a load of school activities, after school activities and holiday activities in the Westfield ward because we know it is desperately needed for the young people in our ward. And I would urge everyone with the resources that they have available to pick up on some of the issues that are being raised in this report and to do what they can within their own wards to reduce inequalities affecting the next generation.
Councillor Bassey.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I too wasn't intending to speak, but I have some sympathy with what has been said by Mark Waters. I live in a village where we have no primary care centre. It was closed 3 years ago. I have people in my village. There's a woman I know, single mum, with a disabled child who has to try and find some way of picking up medicines 4 miles from where she lives. Taxi ride costs 30 quid to get to the surgery. I think there is an importance in actually reminding ourselves about the real people who can get lost in festoons of statistics. I have in my ward young women who'd like to go and get family planning from a doctor, but cannot get there because it's 3 miles away. I think we must always remember the people who are struggling. I have people in my village who'd like to have mental health care services, but because they're out of York, they can't access them and the buses are infrequent. So I hope that in the formulation of all of this, there is a continuous understanding that we're trying to focus on real practical outcomes for people and not do what can sometimes seem to outsiders as an arcane intellectual debate. I'm sure that all of us as councillors know that's not the case, but I think we should be willing to say it more often. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Steels-Walshaw.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for your feedback. I do see and acknowledge that there is an issue with getting appointments and accessing buildings, but the purpose of this report was to look at the bigger issues and see what is there and work towards accessing them, and then look at the recommendations and how these can work. This was specifically for the younger people. So when we know about these issues, then the recommendations can look at working with them. And there are a lot of things going on at the moment in order to improve healthcare access for all ages.
I will now take a vote on the recommendation in the report at item 13. All those wishing to vote in favour, please raise your hands now. Thank you, members. All those wishing to vote against, please raise your hands. Any abstentions?
44 in favour, 1 abstention.
The result is 44 in favour and 1 abstention. The recommendation is therefore carried. I now invite Councillor Steels-Walshaw to move the motion to approve the revised terms of reference for the York Health and Wellbeing Board, as set out at page 349 of the agenda.
Moved, Lord Mayor.
May I have a seconder?
Seconded, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Is council happy to agree the recommendation? Thank you. Do I have council's agreement to note the report of the use of general exception, urgency and special urgency procedures?
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Do I have council's agreement to note the appointments and changes to membership set out at item 16 of the council agenda?
Yes.
Thank you, members.
Lord Mayor.
Oh, sorry. Apologies, Councillor Stewart.
Yeah, thanks, Lord Mayor. Just to ask on one aspect, which is the York Central Lead Members Group, which was the York Central Steering Group. Now, over the years, as I understand it, that's been about a cross-party way of, potentially steering the York Central project, and it's never really been the case. It's more been an information session. But obviously, with this report, we see potentially quite a big change in the membership, because historically it's been about parties and York Central. We've had Councillor Taylor on from a ward point of view, and although Councillor Kilbane's on it, I think that he doesn't sit with a ward hat particularly, he sits with an economic development deputy leader hat. With these changes, we'd see essentially every ward member of Holgate and Micklegate on it, so 6. So it's a really quite significant change in the focus of that group. To say it's not decision-making body in the way I would think or like to see, but it just seems quite significant. I was just wondering on the basis for that, and where all these wonderful members have suddenly come from.
Thank you for that, Councillor Stewart. I think it's essentially formalising a position that already exists, in the sense that ward councillors have always, well, since Labour came into administration, have been welcome to attend a meeting that talks about things that directly affect their wards. In terms of the York Central development is based in Holgate and Micklegate wards. I mean, you're still very welcome to attend yourself. I can't remember seeing you there, actually. So I think, did you attend, or did you send a deputy? I can't remember.
Yeah, I was sat next to you at the last meeting.
Oh, sorry, you clearly made us. You made as great an impression as Councillor Airdle's in his ward.
You spoke to me several times.
I think you're digging now, and I'd stop if I was you. I think and the representation is still very welcome, and it is cross-party, and it's not a decision-making body. It is an information body, and the people who are most directly affected by the developments are the residents of Micklegate and Holgate ward, and it's really important that they get that information directly from their ward councillors, but continue to welcome all parties to that information session, and would even welcome some contributions from people from different political parties when they attend.
Did you want to come back, Councillor Stewart?
Yes, yeah, because the changes go even further than I thought then. So we're moving not just from representatives of groups, we're moving from a situation where it's every single local councillor, but other people can attend if they want, which again seems a further shift. And again, my understanding was York Central was this vast project for all of the city, delivering thousands and thousands of square foot of office space and thousands of new homes, and it was for York as a whole, rather than just this very micro issue of the hardship it may or may not have on wards. So I think that's quite a strange and interesting focus change.
I'm glad we've piqued your interest, Councillor Stewart.
Councillor Douglas.
Can I suggest that the terms of reference for the board are sent to Councillor Stewart? That might help to iron out his misunderstanding of the purpose of that one.
Yes, we'll arrange that after the meeting, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. I think, members, this would be a good opportunity to have a comfort break of 15 minutes. Oh, sorry.
Well, it's for noting anyway.
It was.
So the report is for noting, members, so it is group allocations are set out.
Agreed.
You by all means start, and I just have to stop until you get on with it.
Thank you, members. We now move to agenda item 17 to consider the 3 motions on notice submitted under Standing Order B10. These are included in the list of notice of motions and amendments contained in the agenda supplement. I now invite Councillor Whitcroft to move the first motion on the introduction of a visitor levy.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. York is the shining jewel in the crown of the north of England. Wherever you go in the country, the continent, or indeed the entire world, people have heard of York. Our global reputation is in no small part due to the use of our city's name. We are the first in a total of 35 towns and cities called York, easily making the English cognate of the Viking Jorvik one of the most loved place names. No matter what party or part of the city we represent, we should never stop being proud of our international reputation and the millions of visitors who make the effort to come and see our beautiful city every year. Our city attracts 9 million annual visitors, contributing around £1 billion to our local economy. This benefits local businesses, but it also impacts our public spaces and residents. We undoubtedly see the benefits of tourism, but as any physics teacher will tell us, whether it's Councillor Webb or Councillor Fisher, every action has an equal and opposite reaction. In this case, the tourism economy has an impact on the public realm and on our residents, an impact that would be best addressed with a levy on visitors as outlined in this motion. Now, despite what the naysayers say, presumably, tourism in York is never going away. It fuels our economy, but it also brings us undeniable problems. Some problems, Lord Mayor, we don't mind. I walk over Lendal Bridge every day to work, and I often have to stop to let a tourist take a photo or be asked to take one myself. As locals, we give directions, occasionally make recommendations, and always do our best to make sure our visitors, our guests, have the best stay possible. Such minor tasks are a part of living here. That's what living in York has always meant. But more major problems require serious solutions. It's true the general wear and tear that the ever-increasing footfall our successful tourism economy brings requires us to deliver levels of services that most other cities do not. It touches almost all parts of our residents' lives: litter bins, public enforcement, licensing and street cleaning. The council therefore spends more, and our residents have to pick up the tab in their council tax. We know this is not right. It is our job to try and redress that balance. I appreciate I'm not the first person to come up with this. Like almost everything I work with on the council, the plans have been formulated before I was even born. My motion today remains the work of many hands. I'm very grateful that Councillor Lomas included this policy in the recent budget consultation, and it had over 90% of approval from respondents. Lord Mayor, short of bringing back the public pillory for city councillors, I don't think that anything in York would have a 90% approval rate. Yet this policy has managed to do so. This levy could take many different forms, so visitors to our city accept a small cost towards the public realm they will engage with as they see the beauty of our city. The fact is, Lord Mayor, that far from being surprised by this, visitors are often more surprised that no such levy exists. Anyone who's travelled abroad in recent years will be familiar with the action of leaving a small amount of money towards the local tourist levy, one that is paid without fuss or furor, but paid with pride as tourists feel invested in the place that they are visiting, knowing they are helping to contribute towards the local services that they will rely on. I equally accept this motion may not have all the detail needed for such a comprehensive policy. I've not included the pounds and pence one would expect of a budget motion, for example. This is not a simple tax and spend solution. This is about who we are as a city, how we want the world to see us, and what we expect of those who come to visit us. As far as money is concerned, I hope the impact of this motion will be that the budget conversation that takes place in this chamber every single year will stop being about how to ration a shrinking cake and start to become about slicing a growing one. We can use the revenue to address the costs of tourism, promoting tourism to support jobs, businesses, and the economy. Even the most conservative estimates of this income, but of the income generated by this policy, would stretch into the millions of pounds per year. We've already had support from our leadership. Councillor Douglas introduced a petition to this nature last year, and Councillor Kilbane has spoken out in favour about this in public as well. As cricket season starts, let's add more power to their collective elbow. For the first time in the city's history, take this most stubborn of all wickets. As with so many motions, this agenda item before you is not the end of the conversation, but the start of one. This is a chance for us to set the direction for who we are as a city. I look forward to the debate, Lord Mayor, and I formally move this motion.
May I have a seconder? Councillor Clark.
Seconded, Lord Mayor. Reserve the right.
Notice has been given of 2 amendments to the motion as set out in the supplementary papers. I now invite Councillor Waters to move the first amendment to the motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Yep, I'd certainly like to formally move this amendment, as I don't usually get too involved in the motions, but as the original motion proposes lobbying government to grant powers for local authorities like York to implement additional taxes on tourists, it was too good an opportunity to miss not to raise a similar issue. I'd expect full cross-party support for the amendment and look forward to a seconder for the amended motion and the subsequent debate. This City Council obviously could do a lot with the nigh on £7 million lost to the council tax educational exemption. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Waters. May I have a seconder? Councillor Rowley.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was asked earlier if our group had been approached to second this amendment, and I quite rightly and correctly said we hadn't been approached, and therefore I don't have a pre-written speech to second this. But we do want to second this amendment, and also we will be supporting it as a group for a number of reasons. As you know, I don't do Yabu politics, but I have been aware, as many have, that there are some serious cuts that are being made across all budgets, both locally and nationally, and there are people who will suffer as a result of those cuts. One particular area that won't be touched particularly is the student population. And as Councillor Waters quite rightly said, there is this tax, this council tax educational exemption that's been in place for many, many years, and cities like York are suffering for that. The reason that I wanted also to second this amendment for Councillor Waters is very simply in my ward, we have the highest number of HMOs compared to other wards across the city. Those wards on the west side of the city would have very few and certainly wouldn't have any students. I continually get complaints from my residents about students in HMOs, and whilst this doesn't necessarily address that, what this does do, it does address the inequality that students have. I have been a student, and I would have to put it on record to say that as a Conservative group, we absolutely support students and support the universities here in York, and we want to encourage students to come. However, I do think that it's time that this particular exemption was reviewed, and therefore we're happy to support this amendment, and I'd urge our colleagues to do the same. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I now invite debate on the amendments. Councillor Baxter.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I was under the impression that Councillor Waters didn't have a seconder until a conversation earlier this evening with the Conservatives over there. So I also hadn't prepared a speech, but I just wanted to highlight some of the benefits that students bring to the city. According to the University of York, international students bring in 225 million annually to the city and the wider region, which is a huge benefit. And without those students, we would have a lot less money to invest in our suburbs, in the city centre, and in our wider region. I know through sitting on Planning B that Mark Waters does everything possible to stop HMOs, and that they actually are a really positive contribution in my ward and in wards across the city. And I know that students are keen to integrate in the community, and anything that the council can do, that the university can do, and that I know I do when I sit on the Good Neighbours Forum in my ward, is so important, because students do bring huge positive contribution to the city. And actually a lot of the problems that I hear from colleagues complaining about students is not because of students, but it's because of lack of proper infrastructure and support from the community. So I would encourage my colleagues to reject this amendment and support the contribution that students bring to the city. I know most colleagues around the chamber have been students in the city, and it just shows what a positive contribution we'll make. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eyre.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be very brief. As a group, we would love a debate on local government finance reform, and there are lots of issues that we could all have. In fact, it's one of the things that got me most interested in politics in the first place. Council tax was a temporary tax that was introduced a long time ago and is not the best way. It was supposed to last for a year, but we've still got it nowadays. When I read these papers, however, I saw a motion about a visit levy, and so I was quite surprised this amendment was actually allowed. And if Councillor Waters wants to work with any group about bringing a debate to this chamber about proper local government reform and how we are financed, I'd happily support that. But as a group, we can't support just singling one little part out of that, tagging that onto a motion and trying to force a discussion out of complete context of anything else.
Thank you. I'll now take a vote on the amendment. Oh, sorry, Councillor Whitcroft, did you wish to reply? That's fine.
No, thank you, Lord Mayor.
Apologies for that. I'll now take a vote on the amendment. If you wish to vote for the amendment, please raise your hands now. Thank you. If you wish to vote against the amendment, please raise your hands now.
You're voting.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's 23.
Thank you. If you wish to abstain, thank you. That's four for the amendment, 23 against and 19 abstentions. The amendment is therefore lost. I now invite Councillor Widdowson to move the second amendment to the motion.
Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Councillor Crawshaw.
Before we discuss the proposed amendment, could the monitoring officer please confirm whether or not the first bullet point of the Liberal Democrat amendment could be legally achieved by the executive should council be minded to support it?
So, as members will be aware, presently there is no legislation in place which will allow the introduction of a tourism levy. And any tourism levy to be introduced on a voluntary basis must be done via the bid rather than by the council itself. It remains a valid amendment to put forwards because it is asking the executive to undertake an action rather than committing the council to taking an action, and the executive is at liberty to disregard that action. But it is certainly not, under current legal circumstances, legally enforceable without a change in legislation.
So to be clear, if council asked executive to carry out this amendment, your advice would be to executive that it's not legally possible for them to do so.
It's not legally possible for them to bring it in as legislation stands at present.
Thank you.
However, it is legally possible to do it through the bid and actually form a way of doing it. Okay, so what I'm going to go through is our amendment.
Sorry, just a point of order. I believe the monitoring officer confirmed it was not possible to mandate the bid to do this.
There are different actions that.
Sorry, point of order. Can I just be really clear? Because Councillor Widdowson is saying that it is possible for the council executive to mandate an accommodation bid to introduce this. I believe the monitoring officer confirmed it was not legally possible for that to happen.
The council cannot mandate to bring in a tourism levy. What it can do is seek, as is noted in the amendment, seek for the bid in York to commence the work. So the council cannot do it, but the council can ask the bid to do so.
Okay, so going through this amendment, we've put forward this amendment as a constructive step to hold this administration accountable for the promises they make and the policies they support. When drafting this amendment, there are many other points that the Liberal Democrat group could have raised. For instance, our budget amendment, which was voted down by every single Labour councillor, proposed the introduction of a voluntary tourist tax. This initiative aimed to alleviate the financial pressures on the City of York Council and would have allowed us to reinvest more resources into our local neighbourhoods. We could have highlighted the Executive Member of Finance dismissal of the voluntary tourist tax as nothing more than a fantasy at the budget meeting. We could have referenced Andrew Lawson's statement from the January executive where he said, on the tourism tax, the Hospitality Association of York, which represents many of the larger hotels, they have expressed their disappointment that they have not been consulted as a group, especially because if the tax is ever forthcoming, they will be expected to administer the charge. We could have emphasised the Council's frustration with the Labour government's continued refusal to allow us to introduce a mandatory tourist tax. But instead of overwhelming this motion with political points that Labour could use as an excuse to evade scrutiny, we settled on two straightforward, positive steps that ensure that this isn't just another round of vague promises about a tourist tax, but it's a genuine commitment to action. As has been said earlier, it is clear that 90% of York residents support a tourist tax. Both of the city's large parties are in favour of it. And we need to work with the hospitality sector to ensure a tourist tax is workable and delivers for our visitors, businesses and residents. The time for talk is over. It's time to stop delays and deliver a tourist tax that would benefit the city.
May I have a seconder? Councillor Mason.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to second the Liberal Democrat, none of us got our teeth in today, have we? The Liberal Democrat amendment to this motion. The hospitality sector in York has faced significant challenges in recent years, with the impact of COVID-19 being particularly devastating. Many establishments were struggling to survive, and the sector continues to need substantial support to stay afloat. The Labour government's recent national insurance hike has made it even more worse, hitting the hospitality sector particularly hard. Over the next 5 years, this sector will be burdened by an additional 4.5 billion in tax due to the Chancellor's jobs tax. In response, Liberal Democrats in Parliament have called on the Chancellor to exempt the hospitality sector from this harmful tax. Without support, this tax will take thousands of pounds away from our hoteliers without offering any accompanying package of support. Adding to these challenges, we've seen critical projects in York come to a standstill under this Labour administration. Place staff have not been fully replaced until nearly a year after vacancies arose, and both the city centre and neighbourhoods have been deprived of funding needed to make York an attractive place to visit and live. That's why we believe that it's the right time to introduce a small charge for tourists who stay and enjoy our beautiful city. This charge will allow the hospitality sector, through a business improvement district, to invest in transforming and updating York, boosting growth and driving investment. It also helps relieve the pressure on the council to cover these costs of the services that tourists use and invest in our local neighbourhoods. However, it's crucial that this initiative be accompanied by proper consultation with all stakeholders. Councillor Widdowson has pointed out Andrew Lawson and his indication that no one from the administration had engaged with the Hospitality Association of York on the tourist tax, and from what we've seen, no meaningful consultation has taken place. We urge the administration to move forward with this process and ensure a tourist tax is implemented within this term. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. I now invite debate on the amendments. Councillor Kilbane.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm not entirely sure I followed all of your argument there, Councillor Mason, so I'm happy to talk about it afterwards. It seemed to move in a couple of different directions. And Councillor Widdowson, top marks for political point scoring. I'm saying we're not political point scoring. It's very nicely done. And obviously the amendment, budget amendments are voted on block, aren't they? So I just want to, I want to get past the party politics on this, really. I genuinely welcome the amendment, well, the intention behind the amendment, but it is problematical. Some of those reasons have already been alluded to. So let me just briefly, we've been dealing with both the BID, the Hospitality Association York, and lots of different hoteliers for the last 2 years around this topic. And it is, to be fair to say, quite a sensitive issue that we have to progress carefully with. But the way that it works is that we've got no legislative powers, as you know, in England. They do in Scotland and Wales. We are lobbying hard for those legislative powers, but my guess is that if they come through, they will go to the mayors. And if they go to the mayors, then they'll be looking at York and North Yorkshire. So what I'm saying to the Hospitality Association and to the hoteliers and to the bid is that I think it's quite important that they line their ducks up now and set up an accommodation bid, which is the only legal way that you can enforce the tourism levy now themselves. But, you know, in theory, anybody could set up I mean, Councillor Widdowson, you could set up an accommodation bid. The difficulty that you'd have is getting all of the accommodation businesses to vote for it, because it is a voluntary system. The accommodation businesses have to vote it in. And that's why we've progressed in the way that we have. And I'm conscious that there's not information sharing over everything. So I was at obviously as a member of the bid, I was at their away day last week, and we spent 2 hours talking about this, pros and cons, etc. of an accommodation bid. Look, I'm very happy to share the conversation. I'm very happy to work with the Lib Dems. I'm really pleased that you've got an interest in this subject over the last year or so. And by all means, let's work together to make it happen, because you are clearly unaware of all the work that we have been doing already in this direction. Obviously, we've also set aside some money in the budget to make it work. But right now, we need to bring those partners with us. Some people within Hay were keen for it to happen. Some people weren't. They've got concerns. It's not just the hotels, it's all of the hospitality industry. There are concerns around it that we need to address. But it is definitely in the hospitality industry's interests for them to get an accommodation bid in now, and for them to choose how that's done, rather than have it imposed upon them, which it will be, I'm pretty sure, within the term of this government through the morality. So we'll continue the work, and I'm very happy to bring you all into the tent, because I think this is something that benefits the whole city.
That's Councillor Bassey.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, the Lib Dem amendment talks about consulting with the hospitality sector. And I'd like to add some bones to that by saying what I think the objection always is to a tourism tax is what's the money going to be spent on. There's a cynicism, you'll find it hard to believe, of politicians and politics in general. And people think, well, you raise some money and where does it go? For me, I think one of the ways that you unlock this and move it forwards is to have a clear idea about what you want to raise money for and what you're going to spend it on. And for me, again, we know what the pressures are from tourism. We know the increase in waste and the wearing out of pavements. We also know that we're trying to transform our city into a low carbon city. For my money, I would like to see us consulting with the business community, the Chamber of Commerce, the hospitality sector, by saying we will spend the revenues on this, this and this. I would suggest improving public transport, improving waste collection service, introducing an EV shuttle bus in the city centre so that tourists arriving at the station can get to their hotel easily. That would be of benefit to the tourism sector. It would also benefit all the people in York. It would help people with mobility problems. It would help residents across the city. So if we're going to make this work, if we're going to actually make it go forwards, given all the caveats that are set out that we all know, let's start articulating what we want to do with the money clearly and win support for it in that way. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't see any other hands. Councillor Whitcroft, do you wish to reply?
No, thank you, Lord Mayor.
I will now take a vote on the amendment. If you wish to vote for the amendment, please raise your hands now. If you wish to vote against the amendment, please raise your hands now.
Lord Mayor.
26.
Yeah.
Thank you. If you wish to abstain. Right. That's 19 in favour of the amendment, 26 against and 1 abstention. The amendment is therefore lost. We will now move to debate on the substantive motion as not amended. Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It is vital for us in our city that we make sure that we maintain public realm and public services for both visitors and tourists. During our budget consultation, when we asked people what they thought, they overwhelmingly said that we should pursue a visitor levy to ensure that just like residents and businesses contribute their taxes to these services, so should visitors. Visitors, of course, are vital to our economy and we welcome them all. We do think, however, that they should contribute to the costs of preserving our heritage, history and public spaces that they use, just as they do when they pay to visit individual attractions, such as the Viking Centre. No one is surprised when they queue up at Jorvik to be asked to pay a charge that supports them to maintain their attraction and to provide the information, education and delight that they do day in, day out to so many. We, of course, have been spending time talking to the hospitality and business representatives about how a levy might work. At present, as we have heard from the monitoring officer, we cannot introduce a mandatory levy as the legislation is not there. As we've heard in previous meetings, Councillor Douglas did try her best to work at national level to achieve this. However, as we've heard from Councillor Kilbane, that is now likely that those powers, should they arrive, will rest in a different place. So in the meantime, we do have the option through a hospitality bid to introduce a voluntary levy, but this must be done in conjunction with business representative groups to ensure that we can, working together, design a scheme that works for everyone. It isn't enough to consult, to design a scheme and then ask people if they want it. We have to do real partnership working, as that is the only way to make this work. So it's important we do that right. And as we have said time and time again, when we have been asked this question day in, day out by the opposition, we have said we are working with everyone we can across the city to make this a reality. I thank Councillor Whitcroft for bringing forward this motion so that we can once and for all cement our position on this. And I also thank my former ward colleague, Councillor Stuart Barnes, who raised these issues back in 2019 when we were in opposition and helped me and I think everyone else in the group to understand the wider implications and opportunities of being a tourist city.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Apologies because I didn't prepare anything to say because I assumed that the amendment I made would have been fully supported. I really don't know whether I've missed something here along the way because, you know, everybody's talking about hammering tourists with the tourist tax because the tourists are actually here, they're spending money through the businesses, they're staying in hotels or guest houses. They're actually contributing to the economy, which is just what, as the Lib Dems are saying, is just like the students. So why aren't we treating the two groups the same? Why aren't we lobbying government to remove the educational council tax exemption? Why are we content to see approaching £7 million of council tax funding lost every year to the taxpayers of York? Is it because one demographic doesn't have a vote and one demographic does have a vote, quite often slanted in one particular way? The whole thing, the whole debate, in my opinion, is completely bizarre. The one thing that crops up year after year after year in my ward and certainly in other wards like Tang Hall is why on earth do these properties not pay a council tax? Why on earth are we looking at bins and rubbish piled up and they don't pay a council tax? The whole debate is bizarre.
Councillor Clark.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. There's an astounding number of people that visit York each year. That number is 45 times the number of residents who live here. Visitors share our wonderful city, enjoy its unique experience and support much of its economy. Such a huge number of visitors take their toll, however, on the roads and streets when they travel into and around the city, on the cleanliness and maintenance of public spaces, and on the public transport and services they use. Whilst we welcome the millions of visitors and recognise how vital their role in our local economy, there is an opportunity to raise some income to help deal with the added cost of all those visits. Introduction of a visitor levy on overnight accommodation would enable those who share the experience of our city to also share the cost for the continuation and upkeep of that experience. Overnight accommodation is located in suburbs and neighbourhoods beyond the city walls, all the more evident with a shift in popularity to self-catering. As is the case in Guildhall, the ward I represent with my colleagues, short-term holiday lets are growing rapidly and residential areas and communities are directly affected and at risk of being hollowed out. There are impacts on the cleanliness and maintenance of residential neighbourhoods and pressures on council services such as waste collection and planning enforcement as a result. This is a reason to ensure short-term holiday lets are included in any consideration of a visitor levy. So too, as with residents and communities being directly affected, that is also a reason to ensure levy funds are used and invested right across York and not just in the city centre. There's been much reference to consultations with businesses and the accommodation operators in the city. I think something to celebrate in York are the levels of B&B, hotel and self-catering accommodation that are independent, resident-owned businesses. The hospitality sector has also been mentioned previously, has faced challenging times in the past few years. Reassuringly, York has consistently shown strong figures and growth in terms of attracting visitors and those visitors staying overnight. We must ensure smaller operators are not disadvantaged and additional burdensome costs are not incurred by implementation of a visitor levy. And those small operators feel reassured their businesses will continue to be successful. Their support is key for an effective implementation, and rightly, the motion calls for consultation with these and all stakeholders. A visitor levy affords opportunities to improve the city for residents and visitors, to bring in additional revenue and provide surer financial stability for York's future. I urge members to support the motion. Thank you.
Councillor Stewart.
Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. We're talking here about a group that we broadly welcome to York. We're talking about a group that brings millions to the economy. We're talking about a group that use our services but do not provide a full financial contribution. We're talking about a group that's not all the same but have differing income levels. We're talking about a group that we excel in serving. And we're talking about an issue where we can't influence but we can lobby. Apologies, Lord Mayor. That was my notes for the students' amendment. Sorry. Apologies. We're talking, Lord Mayor, about here a group that we welcome. We're talking about a group that brings millions to the economy. We're talking about a group that use our services but don't make a substantial financial contribution. We're talking about a group that aren't all the same but have varying income levels. We're talking about a group that we excel in serving. We're talking about an issue that we can't influence but we can lobby. It is absurd to say these are two totally different issues and that we can't have any consideration of something about students, but we can talk in the way we're doing about the tourist tax. Our group will be voting against the tourist tax motion as is, because clearly this could have been done in all sorts of other ways. The executive can clearly commission a report looking at the viability or not of this voluntary or mandatory tax. And I'm as confused as anybody about the Lib Dem amendment that it must be a mandatory tax or it must be a voluntary tax. I'm not quite sure on the understanding of voluntary in that basis. I do think tourist taxes will become more common. I think they will move across the country. I think they will be legislated for by the government, assuming it's one of the few things they don't go back on. But I think that will happen over the years ahead. What we don't particularly want is we don't particularly want York to be seen to be leading the charge, and Labour members do, and that is an utterly, I genuinely mean this, that is an utterly fair and logical point of principle that we've have no issues with from your point of view. You guys want to tax, we don't want to tax in the same way. But we don't want to lead that charge, and we also don't think there is the basis at the moment for this administration knowing what it wants or what it would seek to achieve. How this will work? Is it a percentage? Is it a per room? How does it impact outside the city centre? Is it the same if you're offering accommodation in a village compared to city centre? So all those sorts of issues. Now, Councillor Whitcroft, I know, said he doesn't have the full detail in his motion. Well, put another way, there is no detail whatsoever. So we are not opposed to a tourist tax per se, but we wait to see what form this may take and how this may come in more across the country, and then we'll address it at that point. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Crawshaw.
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. I just want to very briefly address the false equivalence that's being drawn between students and tourists. To talk about students in this way is to not recognise or acknowledge that they are largely coming here as temporary residents of our city. They are largely coming from homes elsewhere in the country where they will be paying, or their people that they live with will be paying, council tax. And likewise, we will have many, many young people from this city who will be going to other cities around the country to be students and to learn, where we are recipients of the council tax that's paid on the houses in which they live here. So I don't think that you're drawing a fair equivalence between the two different groups. I think we've also discussed at various points around, over the years, the failings of council tax as a taxation system in the basic sense. But I think it's also really, really important, aside from all of the things around vibrancy and what it actually does for the city in terms of having students and young people here, we also need to acknowledge just how expensive it is to be a student. Most students are leaving university with tens and tens of thousands of pounds worth of debt. And those of us who are my generation or older have had the benefit of a free education and all the things that comes with that. Those same students will be the people who will be driving the economy forward. They will be looking after you all and me and everybody else in this chamber when we are elderly. They will be contributing their taxes, that will be paying our pensions and all those other things. So I really have a problem with this reductive narrative that suggests that just because some people get some sort of a reduction in financial contribution to the city in the temporary time that they're here, that's the same thing as asking people who have enough money to be able to afford to visit our city to make a very, very small contribution towards the running of our city to keep it as nice as it can be for all of us who live here all the year round, for 9 months of the year, or just for one night.
Councillor Whitcroft, would you like to reply?
For the third time of asking, I think I will. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Wow, brilliant. What a debate has been, Lord Mayor. I've enjoyed all the contributions. This is motion number 4 from me, but it's the first time I've had 2 whole amendments to myself. I've never felt so popular. I'd like to thank all the contributions to this debate from across the chamber, specifically Councillor Lomas for her support from the executive bench, providing the intellectual rigour that I simply cannot for this argument. Councillor Clark for seconding my motion, of course, his celebration of tourism, which I think is really important, a sentiment I share entirely. It's not just the economic impact, but it's about the cultural prowess that that tourism gives our city. Councillor Stewart, I accept that the detail is not there. That's because this is the start of the conversation. Your job seems to be here to vote against even having the conversation. I want everyone to be involved in the discussions. I've been pleased by the contributions from the Liberal Democrat members as well. I think that we can have a really positive tourist tax discussion and tourism levy discussion off the back of this motion. From outside the chamber, I'd like to thank Mayor David Scaife for his hard work on this. And I'd also, as Councillor Lomas has, like to pay tribute to the former Councillor Stuart Barnes, who brought a motion much like this one to the chamber in 2019. Although he was knocked back, I hope we can succeed in his name today. I'm also thrilled that my council has done, my council motion has done the impossible. It's prodded Councillor Waters into life. From memory, the councillor has normally left us by this point in the meeting, much to the envy of his more committed members. But I'm pleased to see, despite his typically divisive rhetoric, he has in fact encouraged bipartisanship, getting his Conservative ward colleague to second the amendment. Given the direction of the Tory party, I'm sure Councillor Waters would make a natural fit. I wonder what the bookies' odds are on him becoming the next Shadow Cabinet Minister for Equality and Diversity. The motion has the potential to be a game changer for York. After years of discussions and previous administrations' mealy-mouthed non-committals, we finally have an executive and a council and a mayor going in the right direction. The motion will help us to reclaim York for our residents, whilst going further still to make the city a fantastic destination for tourists. Enough talk, Lord Mayor. Let's crack on and pass this motion.
Thank you. I will now take a vote on the motion. If you wish to vote for the motion, please raise your hands now. Thank you. If you wish to vote against the motion, please raise your hand. Thank you. Right. That's 42 for the motion and 4 against. The motion is therefore carried. I now invite Councillor Fenton to present the second motion, which relates to changes to disability and long-term sickness benefits.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to begin by seeking Council's permission to incorporate Councillor Jane Burton's amendment into the text of my motion, please.
That's fine.
Well,
Is
we need
it?
to take a vote.
We need to have a vote, though. All those in favour?
Again, that's 42.
Thank you. All those against? And abstentions? The amendment is therefore incorporated.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Obviously, since this motion was drafted, more details have emerged of the government proposals in relation to disability and long-term sickness benefits. I did try to future-proof the motion as best I could, particularly with the next full council at which motions can be considered, not being until July. I did believe it was important that this issue was discussed by council before then. I'd like to thank Councillor Jane Burton for her amendment and thank colleagues for agreeing to incorporate it. York has a proud record of stepping up and responding to challenges as they emerge and ensuring that the limited resources we do have can be used to best effect. In 2009, when the seeds of what became austerity were being sown, York's then Lib Dem-led administration launched the More for York initiative, through which savings were identified and delivered whilst protecting the needs of communities. This work culminated in a council budget where, despite savings of £21 million being made, no buildings from which council services were provided were closed. As we know, what followed was 15 more years of austerity. And here we are today with a new and, to my mind, particularly cruel form of austerity, which seems to target some of the most vulnerable members of our community. So the questions for us is this: how will we respond to this latest challenge? We've heard very powerful testimony on the likely impacts of the proposals, and I'd like to thank the public speakers who came this evening and those who were demonstrating outside. It really wasn't easy to listen to, I don't think, for any of us, but it is important that we do hear those voices, we do listen, and we do act. And I'm sure I'm not the only person that's received emails in recent days from residents who are genuinely fearful, and it's really hard to know what to say in response, other than, you know, we're here and we are looking out for them, and we'll keep in touch with them and do what we can. So we can step up, and I think we have shown we can do this working collectively, and I'll give the Poverty Truth Commission as an example of that. Set up under the previous administration and carried forward by this administration, shows that if we put our minds to it and we focus on the challenges faced by the most vulnerable members of our society, we can affect change. So I think at this stage it's hard for us to really get a handle on the scale of the challenge that we're facing, and I know I'm still wading through the impacts analysis document. In terms of what some think tanks and others have said, Resolution Foundation have suggested that between 800,000 and 1.2 million people will lose entitlement to personal independence payments, as well as any benefits they or others receive that are linked to that eligibility. The Joseph Rowntree Foundation have suggested that 50% of people receiving the health-related element of universal credit are currently either unable to heat their home, they're behind on bills, or they have low or very low food security. They also estimate there are 900,000 children living in a household where someone receives the health-related element of UC. We now know in recent days that the value of UC, the health element, is to be frozen, and for new claimants that's to be halved and then frozen. So this really highlights the need for us to prepare for an increase in demand for services that the council and its partners provide. Not least because where people lose their entitlement to the daily living element of PIP, that could have an impact on carers' allowance for those who care for them. So this motion provides a starting point. I'm sure there will be other impacts that will become apparent as time marches on. I'm sure we all feel frustrated at the limited ability that we have to influence government policy, so I welcome the amendment which introduces the letter from the leader to government to hopefully make our collective views known and heard loud and clear. We now need to ensure that the council and our partners are focused on supporting those likely to be most affected either directly or indirectly. So in keeping with the ethos behind the changes to the council scrutiny arrangements, which we discussed earlier, this motion proposes that a cross-party task and finish group takes this work forward as a beginning, but I'm sure there will be other aspects of the council's operation that will need to step up, and I'm sure they will. Thank you very much, and please support the motion.
Thank you. May I have a seconder? Councillor Burton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd also like to thank Councillor Benton for accepting the amendments to his motion. I'd like to say I very much appreciate the cross-party support on this issue. It is an honour to serve the people of Micklegate and to be part of this council. It is very important as a disabled woman to be a councillor and to represent disability issues to the best of my ability. I am proud to be part of this Labour administration, which championed the opening of the city centre streets to blue badge holders and is working to adopt the social model of disability throughout all council functions. It is, however, a sad day and incredibly hard, but incredibly necessary to be amending this motion and making it stronger. As a disabled person, I acutely understand how the disabled community have been left frightened, anxious, and now rightly angry because of the government's proposed changes to the welfare benefits and PIP. Any proposed changes to aid disabled people into work should have been coordinated with disabled people. And if ever there was a case of nothing about us without us, the mantra of the disabled movement, then this policy is a perfect example. Of course, there are disabled people who want to work, and there are plenty of disabled people who do work, but there are also many people for whom work is just not possible. Many disabled people have fluctuating conditions, which reluctant employers and an inflexible work system means they have no hope of finding work. But the onus seems to be on disabled people to find work, not on employers to make workplaces accessible. It leaves many questioning, where are all these jobs going to come from? Disabled people are too often managed out of their jobs by employers who do not care about their obligations under the Equality Act. When applying for jobs and declaring a disability, disabled people are all too often ignored. Even the language around this, disclosing, as if it was some dirty secret, speaks volumes to the overt discrimination and the unconscious bias that exists in our society. There are, of course, employers who are disability friendly, but they are few and far between. For these people who are unable to work, cutting their benefits is condemning them to a life of poverty and debt. How can this be right? As a civilized society, we must support them and not plunge them into poverty and fear. Is this really the way we want to make up budget shortfalls elsewhere? Meanwhile, there seems to be little or no acknowledgement of the connection between our struggling health system groaning under the pressure of years of Tory neglect, with millions of people on waiting lists for surgery and mental health support so lacking that it is not fit for purpose, and the high numbers of people on out of work sickness benefit who are unable to get back to work without the right treatment. For some, the longer they fester on long waiting lists, the more their health worsens, and this can leave them with long-term impairments. And let's not forget that PIP is a benefit which is paid whether you work or not. And by cutting this benefit, a whole swathe of people will not be able to work because they won't be able to afford the care that supports them to work or the car that gets them to work. The language that has been used in some of the media has seen disabled people demonised and blamed for the ills of the world. These policies and the way in which they have been presented have contributed to this demonising of the disabled community in the press and on social media. It is now full of vile comments about scroungers and users of free cars, which has been very hard to bear. This dialogue never needed to happen.
20
Disabled
seconds.
people are rightly demonstrating against the proposed cuts, and we saw slogans such as welfare not warfare on our way into the building tonight. These measures are cruel and ill thought out. They are throwing out the policies and support that have enabled disabled people to live with greater dignity and independence, and will in fact now have the opposite effect of making, amongst other things, many disabled people dependent on social care from local authorities. People will be plunged into poverty. I urge you to support this amended motion so that we can send a clear message as a council and on behalf of the residents of
Thank you,
York
Councillor
that the
Burton.
government needs to think again.
Thank you. We now move to debate the motion. Councillor Runciman.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I think we can all agree that leaking changes to disability and long-term sickness benefits before they were formally announced was unfair and led to a huge amount of stress and anxiety. It's significant to note the comments of Paul Kissack, Joseph Rowntree's Foundation Chief Executive. I quote, "A government that came to office pledging to end the moral scar of food bank use clearly should not be taking steps that could leave disabled people at greater risk of needing to use one," and he's right. Paul Kissack is also right to say that ideas such as the right to try guarantee could help remove the barriers that prevent people from working. However, the accompanying cuts mean that the government risks undermining these positives. The scrapping of the work capability assessment means that disabled people will only have to go through the PIP assessment for disability benefit. But it's clear that restricted eligibility for PIP will make it much harder to get any disability benefits at all. Disabled young people aged between 18 and 21 are likely to be among the most affected by the proposals. It's difficult to see how this approach is legally or morally defensible, particularly as people under 25 already receive lower rates of universal credit. The Resolution Foundation say that benefits from the changes could be completely overshadowed by the scale of income losses, both for those who will receive reduced income support or no support at all. The main beneficiaries are those without health problems or who are not disabled. On average, households with at least one disabled member are estimated to lose out by £400 a year by 2029-30. But households with no disabled members will gain slightly by £35 a year. That sets the scene for the work that lies ahead should the government press ahead with the plans. The council will need to look at what support households with at least one disabled member will need, and with the help of our partners, how we can collectively step up to meet the challenge. I urge members to support the motion. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Lomas.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I want to start by noting the contributions of public speakers and everyone who attended the protest outside this meeting. I listened to everyone who spoke and many of the people privately who attended, as I've listened to them over all my years as a councillor, and I appreciate the work that campaigners did to bring people together and give voice to those who feel powerless. Back in 1998, I worked implementing the Disability Discrimination Act of 1995. At that time, we had hope for change and for a society that might become truly accessible to disabled people. For the last 15 years as a trade union rep, I've supported hundreds of disabled people to remain in work where that was right for them, or supported them to leave where that was best. I was fighting for reasonable adjustments against some unreasonable employers, unreasonable structures, unreasonable policies. I fought for change to those policies, structures, and removal of unreasonable blockers. I campaigned through Disabled Workers Trade Union Congress for systemic change to ensure that all support and services for disabled people was in place to support them where it is right for them to work. I also campaigned for better support for those who leave employment, ensuring they can continue to live their life with dignity. For many disabled people like me, a lifelong chronic condition means that getting well is not a prospect. My life has changed immeasurably during the time since my diagnosis, and learning to live in a very different way and needing many adjustments to retain access to work, to volunteering, to civic and social aspects of life. I face challenges at work. I face the stigma of asking for and receiving adjustments, the questions about being absent from work for the many appointments I need to have, the challenges of waiting times and lack of availability of services and support. For many, personal independence payments are vital to keep them in work and to support their lives outside of work, whether they work or not. PIP addresses the additional costs of living in a disabling society, and many people wrongly conflate it with those benefits which are vital for those unable to work. The threshold for scoring any level in the PIP assessment is already high. The rhetoric of scroungers who fake it to get a free car could not be further from the truth. Many of you served during my last term of office, and you will know that I will always speak up for the rights of disabled people, including myself, whatever the cost to me personally. We as a council and as a society must continue to resist discrimination and inequality, to truly embody the social model of disability and to support everyone in our society to live fulfilling lives, whether or not they work.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Lomas. After the next speaker, I will be issuing the guillotine warning.
Point of order, Lord Mayor. We'd like to move a motion without notice, please, to extend council. I'd suggest a maximum of 30 minutes. I would hope that we won't require all of that 30 minutes, but I think that the nature of this motion and the subsequent motion are important enough that it's worth the time to properly address them.
Do I have a seconder, Councillor Eyre?
Happy to second the motion, Lord Mayor. Also, in terms of brevity, as we do have lots of councillors with children and we have disabled councillors who find it, and some members of the public who find it difficult, I'm happy to withdraw myself from speakers list and urge people, if we can try keep it to a 15-minute extension, that would be most welcome.
Thank you. Can I take a vote on that? All those in favour, please raise your hand.
That's unanimous, Lord.
Thank you, members. We'll now return to the debate. Councillor Watson.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. In essence, the welfare state was born here in York. Seaborn Roundtree's Poverty, a Study of Town Life, was published in 1901 and was the great influencer of David Lloyd George and the 1906 government. That gave rise to the People's Budget, which in turn caused a constitutional crisis and ultimately the curtailment of the powers of the House of Lords. However, at the end of the day, Lloyd George was able to introduce the state pension, unemployment benefit, and what was then known as national assistance. The welfare state had arrived. In the middle of the 20th century, much of the Beveridge Report was enacted, and this entrenched the concepts of welfare benefit. From then until now, allowing for minor ebbs and flows, there would appear to have been an all-party consensus on the fundamentals of these. The scale and the magnitude of these proposed cuts appear to have brought an end to such a consensus. And this is amply illustrated by the comments of the campaigning charity Scope, which has responded to the government's proposals by warning that they would be a catastrophe for disabled people's living standards and independence. It is therefore imperative for anyone who wants to avert that catastrophe to respond to the Green Paper proposals. However, whilst government is consulting on some proposals, others will be legislated for straight away, so there'll be no consultation over reducing the number of people who will qualify for PIP from 2026 onwards through the narrowing of the eligibility criteria, restricting eligibility for UC Health element to just those receiving a daily living award in PIP, affecting those with temporary conditions, and the freezing of UC Health payments for existing claimants, and from 2026, halving and freezing the value of these for new claimants. If you want to have your say on these specific proposals, you will need to lobby your MP. The York Central MP has said that she has grave concerns about the proposals, which would cause disabled people to be pushed into poverty. The York Outer MP, however, seems very supportive of the package. On the 2nd of April, Scope will be in Parliament talking to MPs about what the benefit cuts will really mean for disabled people. I do hope our MPs will be there to listen. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Eyre. Councillor Ben Burton.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll try to do this quickly. I'd like to thank the public speakers first of all, as before. It's vital that yours and other voices are listened to by government over the next few months. The new Labour government has inherited a uniquely challenging position. Public sector debt stands at almost 100% of GDP. Debt repayments are at 10% of revenue, and public spending is already its highest level in a decade. This is combined with a world crisis with trade wars and literal wars putting further pressure on the UK. However, politics is about choices, and when there are pressures like this, it's even more important that we do things to make sure everyone's safeguarded. We all know the impact that austerity had previously on the UK. As Councillor Stewart raised earlier, the Labour Party was previously fighting against those cuts for years. This is because it's been proven over the last decade that cutting benefits doesn't create growth and simultaneously cripples livelihoods. Some elements of the government's proposed welfare changes, such as the opportunity to more easily trial work without losing benefits, are timely and valuable. However, when taking these against a backdrop of what are undoubtedly huge cuts, it's diminished. I find it difficult to hear the Cabinet dress up the changes being entirely delivered to support people. The IFS stated today that the further 500 million of cuts announced yesterday could be perceived to have been done partly to bring down the headroom to the same level it was in October. As our amendment states, any cuts should not be made on predetermined savings, especially when the impact is so huge. It's estimated that just over 370,000 people who currently claim PIP will lose eligibility as a result of these cuts, while another 430,000 who would have been eligible for the benefit in future will now not get it. On average, they will lose £4,500 a year. This will have a massive impact on people's quality of life and their ability to live with dignity. It's also estimated to push a further 50,000 children into poverty. These are not the principles that the Labour Party was founded on. I'm proud that York Labour MP Rachel Maskell continues to speak out on this topic. Yesterday, she acknowledged the financial challenges we face, but stated that we must find other choices. Proposing that a 2% wealth tax on wealth over 10 million would raise 24 billion every year, money that could go to our NHS, our social care services, our buses and our schools. The government must break free from failing politics of austerity, look at new ways to create this revenue and bring dignity to people who've already been failed by successive governments. This motion joins a huge range of voices in asking the government to consider their plans and think about what's right. I expect we'll all be happy to support it.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. there's a realisation when you've actually sat here for too long and too many years when a cruel, austere Tory government merges into a cruel, austere Labour government, and everybody sits here wittering on about it. When is anybody actually going to wake up as to where our money is going? Taxes are going up. There's cutbacks to this, that, and the other. And as a society, we cannot even now look after the most disadvantaged and those that require our support. Rachel Reeves stated this week that each one of those invading this country over the channel costs £41,000 in accommodation costs in hotels.
Point of order.
So let's say 500
order,
come
Chair.
over this week. That's £20 million gone that could go to
Councillor
supporting
Waters.
disadvantaged
Councillor
people.
Waters.
Point of order, Chair. The language that's being used about people here is completely inflammatory. It is unacceptable. I know that there is a standing order that says that Councillor Waters could be asked to remove his remarks and stop speaking. I'll be honest, I can't remember what that point of order is, that standing order is, but I just think we need to stop speaking now. That sort of language, B25 apparently, is completely inappropriate.
Do I get a right of reply to that? Since when have facts been inflammatory? I'm quoting what Rachel Reeves said earlier this week.
The word invading is completely inflammatory.
Which
You know
is a
that.
quote from a former Home Secretary, Suella Braverman.
I rest my case.
So,
Right, members, I'm going to hand over to the monitoring officer.
so we can choose members to either put forward a motion without notice under Rule B25 in order that Councillor Waters no longer be heard and leave the meeting, or someone can move the motion without notice to move to the next speaker.
Move to the next speaker.
Do we have a seconder?
That's
Councillor Lomas.
So, yeah,
All those in favour of moving to the next motion, please raise your
next
hand.
speaker. Next, yeah, move
Next
to the next
speaker, sorry.
Yeah, I'll take those. Okay, that's 42, Lord Mayor. Those against,
Those against?
those abstaining.
Abstentions?
Thank you.
Okay. 2 abstentions. So, next speaker.
We now move on to the next speaker.
Anybody else?
And I
No,
don't
sorry.
actually,
It's to Councillor Fenton to write a reply.
Councillor Fenton.
I have nothing further to add. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
We will now vote on the motion. All those in favour, please raise your hands.
(45 in favour).
Thank you, members. All those against, please raise your hands. Any abstentions? That's 45 in favour, 1 abstention. The motion is therefore carried. I now invite Councillor Baxter to move the third motion, which relates to working to tackle the growing epidemic of violence against women and girls.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Before I start, I feel I should offer a trigger warning of rape and sexual violence. Every few years, the conversation about violence against women and girls is sparked about how we can tackle this epidemic. We had the Me Too movement raising awareness of abuse in the TV and film industry, the tragic murder of Sarah Everard in 2021, and just this last month, the programme Adolescence. The Me Too movement empowered victims to come forward, shook the industry up, leading to increased awareness and accountability. With the statistics we know from the Me Too movement, many women in this room will have unfortunately had a Me Too story. I was 15 at the height of the movement and I'd already had mine. In 2021, Sarah Everard's brutal murder and rape horrified the country and damaged the trust that women and girls had in one of our core institutions, an institution that's very existence was there to protect us. The reaction to Sarah's rape and murder was victim blaming and comments such as women should be streetwise. It may just be a few bad apples, but that is few too many. Every year we have the formidable Jess Phillips, the MP for Birmingham Yardley, read out the names of all the women killed at the hands of men. It took 5 minutes this year. I'm just so pleased that after 10 years of her reading this from opposition, she is now in a position to do something about this. So far, this government has already made huge steps in our efforts to tackle violence against women and girls, such as Raneem's Law, named after the murder of Raneem Uday and her mother, despite multiple reports to the police of their fear from Raneem's ex-husband. This new law means that there will be independent domestic abuse specialists in 999 control rooms. More recently, the show Adolescence kicked off another round of conversations about the very real and devastating impact violence against women and girls has, through the lens of the incel and red pill culture. I commend the positive male role models who have sparked this conversation nationally. From Jamie reducing his mum to the fact that she makes a good roast, the overly friendly and quite frankly creepy security officer that suggests he could easily do her job, the psychologist's job, to the shop worker finding common ground with Jamie and victim blaming Katie for what had happened. As girls in school, we are taught not to wear skirts too short or it will distract the boys, or make sure that we don't give boys the wrong impression for simply being friendly. The idea that we are to blame, we should change our outfit, and that the onus is on us is instilled from girlhood. We're lucky to live in such a safe city, but as many of us counsellors and staff who are women will leave this evening, we will worry about carrying our keys, carrying a rape alarm, and ensuring that we don't walk down any roads that aren't well lit. This is the reality for women. Believe me, women have been trying to change this for years, and we can only get so far. How many more women have to die until something changes? I therefore would encourage all my colleagues to support this motion, but not just that, ensure that every single one of us play our part in tackling this epidemic which directly or indirectly affects every single one of us. Thank you.
Thank you. May I have a seconder? Councillor Sue.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to thank Councillor Baxter for bringing forward this motion on tackling violence against women and girls. Everyone has a right to live free from fear, abuse or violence, and everybody in society has a responsibility to respond to abuse. Domestic abuse affects everyone in every area of life. Domestic abuse does not discriminate against age, gender, sexuality, disability or ethnicity. Domestic abuse exists across all areas, and the sad fact is that domestic abuse is increasing. Commission support services in York and North Yorkshire supported 14,000 victims and survivors in 2023-24. 12,000 of these were women and girls, and over 1,400 were men and boys. The police have recorded over 2,000 events of domestic abuse in the last year, but in York, but the estimates are that this is much closer to 4,000. Worldwide, domestic abuse affects around 26% of heterosexual women, 32% of gay and lesbian women, 45% of bisexual women, 40% of heterosexual men, and 80% of transgender people. Violence against women and girls can take many forms, and we are only really just beginning to discuss issues, especially around coercive control, which is the form of abuse with emotional and psychological behaviour is used to dominate and manipulate another person. It involves patterns of controlling behaviour that limit a person's freedom, autonomy, and ability to make choices. There are behaviours within coercive control that include monitoring, intimidation, humiliation, threats, and this list's not exhaustive. It undermines a victim's self-confidence and alienates them, resulting in people being more unlikely to leave because support systems are completely eroded.
We are proud of the New York and North Yorkshire domestic abuse strategy, which sets out the approaches we're implementing and identifies key objectives around priority, early identification, authentic and inclusive support for driving change. All these elements are important when it comes to stopping domestic abuse. I'm also proud to have opened several domestic abuse events with the council, and it's really important that we keep violence against women and girls at the forefront of our everyday
20
practices.
seconds.
We are all impacted by domestic abuse and the vicarious trauma this creates. I hope that you support this motion and use it as a catalyst to advocate change, to support those affected and be allies against working in systems that allow abuse to persist. Together we can make a difference.
Thank you. We now move to debate on the motion. Does anyone wish to speak? Councillor Crawshaw.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'd like to speak to all the men that are here this evening, whether you're a councillor, an officer, a member of security, sitting in the public gallery or watching online. I believe that violence against women and girls is not women's and girls' problem. It is our problem, a problem that all men need to face up to and one that we all have a responsibility to do something about. But of course, that's easy to say, isn't it? So what do we actually do? Well, I think the first thing that we all need to acknowledge and accept is that we still live in a deeply sexist society. Sexism that is so deeply entrenched that we don't always recognise it in our friends, in our fathers, sons, nephews, and in ourselves. Yet the more that we are able to recognise and acknowledge it, the more that we as men can do something about it. Step 2 is to reflect on and accept our roles in perpetuating and challenging sexism and misogyny, a wave of which is sweeping the internet. Battles that we may have thought long won need fighting again. It's our responsibility as men to help our sons, nephews and grandsons navigate this misinformation, sexist tropes, the playground banter, and help them to be better men than we've been able to be. We need to empower them to listen to their female friends, to challenge their male friends, to see the online influencers for the poison that they are. And in seeking to empower them, we need to support one another to feel able to challenge our peers, those men around us who perpetuate that low-level sexism and misogyny that says it's okay to objectify, disregard or dismiss women. Because step 3, possibly the hardest, is to be the change we want to see. I guarantee you that every man here will have experienced cloakroom or workplace banter, online memes or blokey jokes in the pub where women, possibly colleagues, partners or friends, have been objectified others or had jokes made at their expense simply for being a woman. It's hard to challenge, it can feel awkward and uncomfortable, but wouldn't you rather feel that than have your daughter, sister or partner experience the behaviours we know they are sometimes subjected to? Unwanted attention, unwanted touching, worse. Because, fellas, I can guarantee you that every woman you know will have experienced this. And we as men not only have to take responsibility for our own actions, we also have to challenge the actions and attitudes of the men around us if we want it to stop. So to get it started, as male councillors, we need to make sure that we always listen when our female colleagues speak in meetings, not wait until male colleagues make the same points before we engage or agree. We need to stop talking over female colleagues or officers when we don't do the same to male colleagues. We need to recognise our female colleagues' experience and perspectives as equal or perhaps superior to our own. And to be blunt, we need to not stare at or touch our colleagues, however innocuously we consider it, whatever we feel our own motivations may be. We can't do that in ways that make them feel uncomfortable. These are all things that I have heard female colleagues complain about in this council in the past couple of years. We, as men, need to take our responsibility for making it stop.
Councillor Coles.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll try and be brief. Thank you, and thank you to for the dispensation to speak when I have to declare an interest. The motion is very timely and is extremely urgent. Statistically, our city and the wider region is one of the safest places in the country to live. But actually in our city, wherever you are, in farms, in villages, in the rural areas, in the suburbs and in the city centre, there will be rape, sexual assault and domestic abuse happening every single day. And there were last year over 1,500 rapes and sexual assaults just in our region. So the reason it's important for us to discuss this motion here is because it's about power, and we are all people in this room with power and influence in our local communities. We know that there is serious misogyny and sexism that sits behind the crimes that are perpetuated against women and girls, as well as an unhealthy dose of everyday sexism that sits behind the grief that women of all ages encounter every single day. For too many women and girls, we spend too much of our lives in fear of what can happen when we go out with our friends, fear of if we have too much to drink or nothing to drink at all, fear if we have a good time or look miserable, travel home from work or college, sit on a bench in a public place, or challenge someone behaving badly, or in the case of domestic abuse, simply live in our own home. And there is nothing natural about that fear, but it is normal, far too normal. No woman in this room, as other councillors have said, will not have experienced it in some form. Women in my ward who have been or are still victims of domestic abuse, cases that affect people from young parents to pensioners, women who tell me about their daughters being spiked on a night out in town. And what worries me is that behind every person who tells their story and reports it either formally or informally, there are many, many more who don't report anything at all. So the resolves part of this motion are, I think, the most important because they are about all of us. We do need the council leader to talk more about the work the council are doing because City of York Council are leading the way in a lot of this work. But we also need support services and stronger partnerships with schools, with different council teams and of course the police. And as Councillor Crawshaw said, we need men as well as women to take this on. I hope that this will be one of those occasions in this council where everyone unites. Tackling violence against women and girls has to be about everybody, and it has to be about men as well as women. And it does require us all to work together, including all of us in this room. So I hope that everyone will support the motion.
Councillor Nichols.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I first of all, I totally agree with Councillor Crawshaw. It's blokes. There's not many women duffing women up. As a father of 3 daughters, there's nothing worse than worrying about your girls going out. You think, well, ladies got to worry. I know I'm not belittling what women have to worry about, but as a father, worrying when your daughter's coming home is quite scary. So I totally support this motion. In fact, I would have strengthened it. The Women for Action, the action day should be every day. It's not something for 16 days a year. It should be every day. The relationships, I totally get. And the reporting format frequently, it should be all the time. We shouldn't be just putting it every time we feel like it. And the education is a key thing. My wife is a teacher and she knows the lads' attitude is quite appalling. They watch porn on the phones all the time. So it's educating those kids, those boys, that women are just as good as we are. In fact, I know that women are better than us men are because we're the ones that go around duffing them up. So absolutely get behind this motion 100%. As I say, it's every day you should be in about the ladies, not just the 16 days a year. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Nye.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The Liberal Democrat Group welcomes this motion and is very happy to support it. In December 2021, our group proposed a motion which endorsed the Council's application to become a white ribbon accredited local authority. And it's right that tackling violence against women and girls remains at the forefront of all our minds. This evening, we've discussed the impact of the government's proposed changes to disability and long-term sickness benefits. And we need to be mindful of the fact that there may be women living in our city for whom PIP is the only source of income that is independent of an abusive spouse or partner. If they lose their PIP, that may leave them with no independent income and potentially less able to escape from an abusive relationship. I hope that is something we can feed back to the government and to our MPs. I am pleased and proud that in Parliament, Lib Dem MP Josh Babarinde has introduced a private member's bill calling for domestic abuse to be legally recognised as an aggravating factor in certain offences. Josh suffered abuse at the hands of his mother's ex-partner, which had a profound impact on him and his family, which is what has motivated him to get a change in the law. His proposals would be similar to the offences of racially and religiously aggravated assault, but would create a new domestic abuse aggravated class of ABH, GBH and assault. Campaigners make the point that defining domestic abuse as a specific offence means such offenders could be held back from prisoner early release schemes. Last year, around 2,800 prisoners were released early as part of an emergency plan to ease overcrowding in jails. The government said high-risk prisoners would not be let out, but some domestic abuse offenders were released. The charity Women's Aid is supporting Josh Babarindi's private members bill, and I hope that the government will either support it or incorporate it into the new victims bill or crime and policing bill. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Waters.
Thank you, Chair. I noted with interest this motion referring to the growing epidemic of violence against women and girls. But I do think the root causes of these increases should be tackled rather than the symptoms of the epidemic. And as such, the words of the Polish presidential candidate, Sławomir Mencen, at a political rally only last week, should be heard to this motion. And I quote verbatim: "If we allow immigrants from culturally different countries into Europe, into Poland, then things will start to be the same here as they are in Western Europe. Everywhere in the West, it is the same. Here, a drastic example, and sensitive people should close their ears. Great Britain." Yeah.
So you might.
The entirely appropriate laws chamber, therefore, should not be heard.
Is there a seconder? Councillor Webb. All those in favour?
42, Lord Mayor. 41. 41, Lord Mayor.
That's 41.
Against.
Those against? That's nothing. Abstentions? We will now move on. I don't see any other raised hands, so Councillor Baxter, do you wish to reply?
I'd just like to highlight the irony of a woman proposing this motion, talking about how we can't do it on our own and we need men to be our allies, and then for another council member to then turn it into a racist rant. It's completely inappropriate and completely takes away from the whole point of the motion. I don't think he listened to a word that was just said, and it's really disappointing to hear.
I will now take a vote on the motion. If you wish to vote for the motion, please raise your hands now.
Yeah, that's unanimous, Lord Mayor.
That's unanimous. The motion is therefore carried. That concludes the selection of motions. And you will be pleased to know I have no further urgent business. So that concludes the meeting this evening. Thank you very much.